What's up, dude?
Hey man,
Hang on. Let me get this setup going here. Look at your nice background with wood and
wooden
acoustic
acoustic treatment.
panels.
Yep.
Look at mine. Terrible. Look at I got nothing. I got a couple level locks. That's pretty cool, but
Yeah, I don't know about that. I mean, that seems like something from like a what do you call it? Design magazine. Very,
yeah.
very consciously placed plants, and no, it looks good.
Yes. The plants are good. I got some more plants hanging around. I'll give you a little quick tour of my home studio, but this is the main rig. It's coffee and nice speakers, Pro Tools.
Nice.
Nothing really
What
that
speakers
interesting.
are you running now?
These are Dutch and Dutch 8Cs. Um, my friend is letting me borrow these. He has two pairs, and I think they're 6,000 a piece. So these are $12,000 speakers. They're
Ouch.
incredible, but I mean, come on, like
Is it worth
who's
it?
that's the question, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's there's always like you do get something for your money, but like the scale as you go from like basic pro audio gear into the high end, like the exponential curve is crazy and stuff gets
Right.
so expensive. But then again, like if you're doing it at a pro level and the income matches that, then you know, go ahead and do your
Right.
thing.
Right. Didn't make sense. Yeah, I'm not I know what you mean. Speakers especially too, because like I have these I bought these output frontier speakers. Have you seen those? They're like
Uh,
they're pretty cool. They're tiny. I forget what size they are, but I had those before just because I thought they looked cool and I wanted to try them out. And they're in that lower price range of like I guess mid price range, like 1,200 a pair or something like that. And they're good, but these are better. Are they are they 10 times better? I don't know, but now that I'm so used to these and my mixes have gotten better on them noticeably. And so I wish they were like half that price. Do you know what I mean?
yeah, yeah.
It's a bit much.
Yeah, that is the case with a lot of stuff, but it's like you kind of like if you need it as kind of the part of the next level you're going into
Yeah.
and the money is justified in terms of what you're making with it, then it becomes a different conversation, but it doesn't help paying, over
Right.
10K for a single piece of equipment.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, I'm finally at that point where I feel like I am more justified in larger purchases. In the past, I've always been like in my 20s. I'm 34 now, but in my 20s, I was a scrapper. It was like I'm going to get the best cheapest stuff. I'll buy used SM57s and all that kind of stuff. I never bought nice shit basically until recently, and I feel like I do justify it. It has to be justified against how much potential how much potential revenue I could get out of the equipment I buy, which is probably smart, but also I think I don't know. It feels kind of limiting sometimes. Like you shouldn't just buy something because it will, in my opinion, you shouldn't just buy something because it will make you money or because you think it'll translate to revenue or something. It's like if you really want it, buy it, get it, put it on a credit card, deal with it later. But I don't know. Maybe that's the American way of looking at it.
No, I think it's valid, and especially when it comes to things that are non-monetary, like creative inspiration. Like
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
it's sometimes tough to put a price tag on that, nor would you even necessarily want to, but also creative inspiration and also for how many years to come. You could buy something rather expensive now, but if you're going to use it, if not for the rest of your life, then at least for a good amount of time, and maybe create a bunch of good music or whatever with it. So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't
Yeah.
I don't think it's good to be overly focused on the money. But on the other hand, I think artists and creatives are too much on the impulsive side. And
Mm-hmm.
I just kind
Yeah.
of want to counterbalance that and say, think about it in terms of the input and output. That shouldn't be the
Mm-hmm.
only thing, but maybe more of that instead of
Yeah,
the impulse buy stuff.
I agree. And I also think there's an element in there of something I've learned recently is like, I'll buy a nice, I don't know, pedal or I'm trying to think of what I just bought that I didn't like. I bought this Townsend Labs virtual mic that UAD, it works with the UAD stuff. And I bought it. I was like, oh, this is great. It's like I can use it for all these different things, reasonably priced for what it does. And I wanted to like it so many times, over and over and over again. And I just never liked it on anything. And I'm like, why do I still have this? I finally just put it on reverb. But like stuff like that too, where there's another element where I think if you don't like it, even if a bunch of other people do, don't keep it or don't use it. Or if you like the shitty thing that nobody else likes but you like it, keep that too. I think it's like there's so many personal connections with gear these days that shouldn't be overlooked. And that's something I've tried to learn more too as I move on in life and start amassing all this gear. I'm like, what do I really like and what can I just get rid of or just not use anymore?
Yeah, because it's at the end of the day, it should be about what you create with it. What are you actually using it on? And no listener really cares about whether your effect pedal cost you $5 or $500. Like it doesn't,
Yeah.
in the context of making good sounding music, it just doesn't really matter. But
Agreed.
it's actually good to hear your thoughts on the Townsend mic thing, because I do like the concept. I haven't tried any of them, like the Townsend or the Slate stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the concept is good. But I'm sort of, because a lot of the time when you're playing with microphones, it's something very kind of visceral that you feel when you hear the mic playback. And
Yeah.
and I don't know, like to me it seems like much of it comes down to, I'm not sure if I can actually articulate this, but it feels like you can feel the internal workings of the mic, the weight of the mic. And I'm not sure if they can actually model that. Like it doesn't usually feel hefty enough. But I don't know, maybe you have some thoughts on that.
Dude, I totally agree. I couldn't agree more. That's actually a way I hadn't thought about it, but probably unconsciously thought about it like that. Like the last thing I personally need right now is like more digital options. I'm good. I have enough digital options in here. So when I'm out in this world and I'm recording something, I would rather spend more money on getting 2 or 3 really expensive mics, that are included in the Slate virtual mic or the UAD Townsend. I'd rather spend money on the real thing, because especially what I do too, which is like sampling stuff, I don't want to introduce the attainable stuff, I guess. Like it feels too attainable. Maybe that's it. Like I don't want to be able to get that sound of a mic that I don't own. I'd rather own it and know that it's going through all the little shit inside of that mic and all the weirdness that's happening in there. So yeah, I basically I feel like I just don't need digital options anymore. I'm good. Give me the real thing.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, first of all, thanks for doing this. It means a lot, and I appreciate the time you put into this. And it's cool to chat in person, because we've only been emailing a few times. So yeah, it's cool. Just to give
You
people,
did a great circles demo, so I feel like I owe you. I feel like I owe you one.
you don't owe me anything. Well, you're here, so consider it
Cool.
done. No, I mean, it was, first of all, it's been my pleasure to play with them, because they are great samples, and
Sweet.
Anytime you can share something that you care about and something that you like, I'll do that any day. So yeah, but thanks for sending them over, because
Yeah, man.
they will serve a lot of purposes for me, for sure.
That's great.
Just to give people some context about who you are and what you do, this is kind of like a very condensed CV, I guess, but you're the founder, obviously, of Circles Drum Samples. So you're a company, you develop amazing sounding drum sample libraries. And just for those who don't know what sample libraries are, in case someone's watching this, essentially they're, I guess, recordings of instruments which are then processed and programmed into this piece of software, which you can in turn then you can replay those recorded samples with something like a MIDI keyboard or program that on your computer. So essentially, you can use sounds that you wouldn't otherwise have access to. But yeah, obviously relating to your work at Circles, you're an audio engineer and also a badass drummer from what I've heard. And I also picked up that you were sort of quite, you had sort of quite significant efforts with this band called Tickle Me Pink. Is that correct?
You did your research, huh?
Well, I mean, I try my best. But before we dive any deeper, is there anything you'd like to sort of add to that condensed CV? Anything you want people to know in terms of what it is that you do?
Yeah, it's no, I mean you summarized it well. I started Circles probably like 5 or 6 years ago as one single drum sample library, and then it became 2 and 3, and now it's like 14 or whatever. And we have people. The people that buy our libraries they're all over the world. They're all different types of musicians, engineers, producers. Like it's pretty all over the spectrum. So we've sort of adapted what we do as the libraries go on to, people seem to like this dead stuff. Let's keep doing the dead shit for a while. Or people don't really like the outdoor or desert recordings we do. We won't do those anymore. And so it morphs and it changes as time goes on. But yeah, when you pretty much everything at Circles that you see or hear or read on the website or whatever is all just me doing it. I have my buddy Tyler help me record stuff, and Andrew Berlin at the Blasting Room Studios down the street. He'll help me mix and record stuff. But the majority of it is just me, and I spend a lot of time doing non-musical stuff. It's like running this company is intense in non-musical ways more than musical, actually. Like the drumming and the production for the demo songs or whatever is the easy fun shit, and the hard stuff is like creating a functioning website, hiring developers, hiring graphic designers, doing the graphic design myself, or running ads, making sure all my creative's good, my ads are popping. Kind of the managerial, just running of a business shit takes up probably 80% of my time. So like I am I would consider myself a drummer first, but I don't. That's like the least part of what I do anymore. That was what I did all through my 20s, and basically now I don't do that. Like I've got a drum set up right there, and I don't play anymore. I'm just here. I'm here all the time. This is my new drum set.
Yeah. Well, we're definitely going to come back to a lot of those things you touched on, and I kind of know, even though I don't do anything at the scale that you do it, or even anything similar enough to what you do, but I sort of know the path of trying to do something seriously and professionally, and then finding that you spend a lot of your time on a lot of things you didn't expect to be spending your time on, and that kind of becomes your life essentially. But if we go back to the very beginning of your life, so you're now in Fort Collins, Colorado.
Yeah.
Is Correct. That where you're sort of not sort of literally, are you originally from there, or did your story start somewhere else?
No, wasn't born in Colorado, but moved here when I was like 6 years old and spent from 6 to 23 in Colorado. Grew up here, grew up playing in bands here. the band that you mentioned before, Tickle Me Pink, was technically my first band. I met Sean, the singer, at a talent show in 2004 or 5. Met him at a talent show. I won. I got first place. He got second place. I used to rub that in his face all the time. But we're like, he was a singer, guitarist. I was a drummer. Played stupid drum solo. It's on YouTube somewhere. And we went to each other afterwards. And we're like, hey, do you want to like start a band? Like, this kind of makes sense. You know, we're both at this high school. You're a songwriter. I'm a drummer. Let's do a band. Started a band. We graduated early to make this record with this guy named Chris Coip in Virginia. He'd worked with like John Mayer and Jason Mraz and these kind of like East Coast Virginia producers and stuff he'd worked with, and he thought he could do something with us. So we drove out there. I'm 17 years old, 18 years old or whatever, 17. Made a record, didn't do anything. Did a record after that did a lot. It relatively a lot. It was this record called Madeline, and we had this one song, this 2 singles, but this first single was a song called Typical that started to blow up on terrestrial radio here in Colorado. And then it got a bunch of attention from labels all over. We had Capitol Records fly out, and Atlantic, I think, was part of it. And then this one label, they're called Wind Up Records. They sent out their A&R. Her name was Diana Meltzer, and this other guy named Mike Kahn were the 2 like A&Rs there at this record label called Wind Up. Wind Up at the time had Creed, Evanescence, Seether, kind of these like dorky new metal rock bands and stuff, but they came loaded with cash. Like they had so much money from these bands because they just come off this huge run of an era where bands would sell CDs and go double diamond, like 20 million records like Creed did. So they had all this cash. And so when we looked at all these record deals that we were getting offered, it was like this shitty Capitol deal, this shitty Atlantic deal, and this Wind Up deal was like way out of proportion monetarily with everything. And we were young. And so we were like, let's take the deal with all the benefits and all the money and shit. So we did. And looking back, it's funny now because I thought this was like a normal sort of thing that like a band does. Like, oh yeah, you start a band, you're in high school, and you sign a record deal. Like, doesn't everybody do this? And looking back, I'm like, oh my fucking God, that was such a rare thing to happen. Like that doesn't happen. So I'm looking back now thinking like, oh my God, we're so lucky that we got to do that. But this record deal that we signed was like, it was like a 5-year deal, and they paid out I forget X amount of years for like what our salary would be, and they paid us a salary. They paid for our health insurance. They bought us a van and a trailer. They paid for our tour support and equipment. There's just like this ongoing list of stuff they gave us, and it was insane. So we put out a record on July 1st, 2008. And on that day, the bass player in our band died of a heroin overdose that morning. So it was like still like the craziest day of my life. Like those 2 things coming together like that. It was fucking nuts. And we had all these tours lined up 2 weeks later. That was going to take us on, God, where were we? It was like I think the tour started in California with this band Finch and Scary Kids Scaring Kids. And then the next tour was Hawthorne Heights, and the next tour was Red Jumpsuit Apparatus, like all these bands that were popular here in 2008. So we had all this shit lined up, this major record deal. And then Johnny, our bass player, died that day. So it completely changed the course of the band. And we ended up doing the tours. My buddy Joey came back and filled in for Johnny. But it was this whole like being thrust into this industry. I mean, I was 19 at the time. So I'd already signed a record deal. My friend just died of a heroin overdose. I'm going on the first tour of my life. I just had this record released nationally. Um, it was it was crazy. That's how I started my journey into this industry. Was just like bang.
Yeah, it's essentially you're kind of simultaneously, obviously, if we disregard the the sad stuff, you're kind of living out uh, this dream uh, on one hand, but you kind of touched on it, I guess, in terms of like at that time you simultaneously, it's your dream, but you also kind of think it's going to happen because you're young and you're probably fueled by this kind of the positive side of the ego, driving you forward and pushing you to do things and try things. So on one hand you expect it to happen, but on the other it is your actual dream. So at that time, like, could you maybe describe, like, did you have any sort of second guesses about like how is this happening, how is this coming together, and was it like did was it surprising to you? And well, I guess it must have been a mixture of all kinds of emotions, but
Yeah.
but you mentioned that you later on realized how crazy all of it was, but at that time, because some people will find themselves perhaps not in that same position, but in a similar position, getting some kind of a deal with a label or something else. Was that something? Did you realize at the time the speciality of it all, or?
I don't know. It was so much of this I've been able to piece together in like hindsight, and also I think, well, I know what I went through and what that band went through, all of us included, like was traumatic. So it was, I don't think any of us had time to really like go back and process what was going on. It was I think at the time we knew we were lucky. We knew that that this was rare, that not every band gets a record deal, not every band can do what we do, but still it felt maybe, I mean, we probably had egos about it, like of course, we're all so amazing, like of course we would get a record deal. I think that being young, having that ego was definitely a factor. But yeah, I really think, look, having 10, 15 years passed since then, I'm able to look at it much more objectively and go, oh yeah, that was rare, that was special, we were lucky, that was crazy. And I'm glad it happened, but I don't have any desire to go back and live that kind of lifestyle ever again.
Was there something that sort of carried you through it in the sense of keeping you on the right track, or not allowing you to fall into some of the common pitfalls? Was there something? Was it your upbringing, or your friends, or a mentor, or what
Yeah.
sustained you and prevented you from going down I guess the darker path?
Yeah, that's a great question. I did not have a mentor at all. Um, we had, we kind of had each other in this weird, like, me and the other band members, we kind of had each other to lean on. There were other, it's so tricky. I honestly, looking back, I'm like, I don't know how I held it together. I think a lot of it was momentum, a lot of it's being young, having that ability to bounce back quickly. But I don't know. I did have, my family was very supportive. Um, my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, was very supportive. And so that's probably one of the biggest things, is like having a stable relationship, having a good family system. It's hard too, coming out of that, because it was like drugs and alcohol and stuff, I think, were probably there, and I wasn't really interested in it at the time, but they existed around us, and our singer had a lot of problems with that. And he'll be the first one to admit it, but that was troubling. But I think it was just, a lot of it was momentum too. You're like, you know, inescapable momentum of the moment, and probably knowing deep down that this isn't going to happen again, or like we kind of just got to go through this and exist and do the best we can. So yeah, I don't know. It's a tricky one to unpack, though. I still I look back on that time of my life and I go, wow, was that really me? Like, did we really do that? Was that like a fever dream? It's crazy.
Yeah, I feel like that's always a case when you have a very distinctive, different time period in your life, and then you do something else, and then you look at or jump on memory lane one way or the other, and it kind of
Yeah.
feels like a different life almost. But some of that, what you described, kind of brings some of the stuff like Dave Grohl has talked about, which is kind of like, obviously he was in a massively successful band, but to me it seems like if you can manage to focus on the thing itself that you're doing, like if your love to the music and your focus on the music is a priority, then maybe that's going to guide some of your behavior away from
Mhm.
some of the kind of satellite themes and focus on the music. Like I think Dave Grohl said he just wanted to buy a new grill, and with the money he got, and then
Yeah.
just cook some barbecue. But
Mhm.
but yeah, I think what you said is also super important, because it is, I don't think there is one answer to it. Like it in most cases it's probably like a multi-dimensional thing where your girlfriend or boyfriend plays a role, and your family plays a role, and your friends. So, but yeah, it's not always very clear where
Right.
where a lot of the influence comes from. But you obviously have
Mhm.
your surname strikes me as Scandinavian. Is that?
Very much so.
Yes. So is that something like, are your parents from there, or does it go back in time more? Do you know where
Mhm.
those roots come from?
It's funny is, so my full name, Stefan Anders Runstrom, is like obviously very Scandinavian. And
Yeah.
the other guy here at Circles, Tyler Lindgren, also has very deep Norwegian roots. And we looked back. I did a 23andMe. I think I'm like 50%. It's unclear whether it's Norway or Sweden, but we both have, according to genetic testing, we both have this particular part of Norway. I think it's like the Hordaland or something. I can't remember. I want to say it's like the southwest part of Norway, where we both date back to. We both have family there, and we ended up going to school together, and now he's part of this company. So I find that very interesting. But I think it was my great grandparents that immigrated here in 1916 or 17. I think from Norway or from Sweden. I don't know. The family stuff gets tricky, and I think for the longest time everybody thought we were Swedish, but we're actually Norwegian. So there's that. And but my grandfather was born here. My dad's dad was born here in 1917, like straight off the boat. So I'm two and basically 3 generations removed from the homeland.
Yeah. Cool. Um, Jumping back to the kind of early life stuff, how was
Mhm.
music sort of introduced to your life? Like, were you guided to do it, or did you sort of happen to stumble into it over time?
My dad played drums, and we had a drum set in the basement. That was the biggest thing. And he taught me my first like drum beat. So that was, I would say that's kind of when everything started. That's before I conceptually knew like what music was or how to make it at all. So we had a drum set. We had a piano that I used to just kind of like dink around on and make melodies. Didn't learn guitar or bass or any stringed instrument ever. And I kind of wished I would have done that earlier on because it took me a while to learn that shit like as an adult. I couldn't play any like melodic instrument or sing. I still can't sing, but I can play guitar and bass and piano now. But I couldn't do any of that until I was like 23 or something. So I'm like a late learner with that stuff. But going back, it was having a drum set, having drums in my house in my basement, and then just kind of learning them, and then starting to identify as a drummer was probably the biggest thing where I go, okay, I can play, like I'm better than all my friends. Well, not better, but like I can do something they can't do. So I'm like, oh, like I'm a drummer now. Like I'm a real drummer. And then started to do that in school and stuff. And then I think once I started to identify as that, and then start going to drum clinics and taking private drum lessons, and then it becomes your identity, and then you become that's just kind of what you do. And then people start looking at you like that, like, oh, he's a drummer, he should play in our band and stuff. So that's kind of how I started. And I think I got I think it was easy for me to pick up this the drums. Like I definitely played a lot, but it felt like pretty easy to pick up, to start playing. And that was nice because I didn't really hit any roadblocks where I was like, oh, I'm terrible, I can't do this certain thing, I'm just going to give up. Like it always felt like I had like a natural sort of progression into playing better. And then I started to get worse now. I was probably a better drummer at 17 than I am now.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of in the same ballpark. Probably not 17, but like I started taking drum lessons. I think it was like during third grade or something like that, or
Okay.
maybe second grade. And basically, I was driving back home from school. I wasn't driving, but my dad was driving. We were in the car, and he asked me and my brother, like, "What do you want to play? Like, pick an instrument." And
Mm-hmm.
I had this friend at school called Lari, who is still a good friend of mine, amazing drummer. And I thought he was super cool because he had actually asked the teacher if he could bring his drum kit to school, and this was like during first grade. And he asked
Uh-huh.
if he could play a track for all of us at school, and he did
Uh-huh.
that. And that was like obviously a super weird thing to do, but I thought drumming was pretty cool, and
That's cool.
he was pretty cool. And then I picked up a drum kit, and my dad also had a kit in the basement. And I remember when I went to because they had some sort of like a test, or like what's the word? You had to kind of audition to be able to
Mm-hmm.
go into the music school, and they played like a drum beat in front of me and said like, can you play that? Oh, well, first of all, they asked me if I had ever touched a drum kit, and I really hadn't done that. And they played like
Mm-hmm.
a basic beat, and then they just told me to copy it, and I could do that pretty well. And they were kind of surprised that I haven't actually played drums ever, but I still
That's
had
cool.
I still had no idea what I was doing.
Yeah,
But
you were natural.
yeah, and I think that's a super important thing, because I think some people might be sort of hitting their heads against the wall with something that might be less than ideal for them, because pretty much
Yeah.
everyone that I know to be uh, really good at what they do, they are some kind of natural in what they're doing.
Yeah.
And I say that to kind of not discourage, but encourage people to maybe test something else, because there's probably something out there that comes naturally to you. Um,
Right.
and if you want to be, any sort of professional in doing this, then it makes sense to play into your strengths. But
Yeah, I
yeah.
agree. That's a good point. Do you still play drums?
Uh, Sort of. I mean, I don't actually have a physical drum kit anymore. I'm constantly, playing with my hands, and like I think
So,
a lot of that keeps the, the neural connections going. So I don't
yeah.
actually think I'm any worse as a drummer than I was, I don't know, 10 years ago when I was actually still playing an actual drum kit. I think I'm actually
Mhm.
better because I'm keeping the neural pathways active, and I'm actually
Yeah.
better than I was before. But I haven't touched a pair of drumsticks in like, I don't know, at least 5 to 7 years or something like
Oh,
that.
damn. Yeah.
So I play all of my drumming on this keyboard,
Yeah.
playing MIDI. So it's kind of,
Basically, me too, man. Honestly, like I don't. I have so many great drums and mics 10 feet away, and I'm just all the time. I'm just doing this because it's so much easier. And I'm such a better drummer on my fingers than I am. Well, I don't know about that, but I'm pretty good. I've gotten pretty good at it.
yeah, I'm probably somewhere in between. I'm definitely better on a kit because I haven't really, it's kind of like I'm better at playing, obviously, the piano with all of my fingers, but the drum kit, like, it's a bit different. But
It is.
definitely a useful skill, like if you're a music
Yeah.
producer or anything like that.
Yeah, and I think it's useful to know how to articulate drum parts, even if you can't play, to mouth drum them or even on a keyboard or whatever, just to be able to have that because it's like it's so much of a song, it's so much of a structure of something. To be able to articulate rhythm, I think gives you such an advantage over. I think if you were to choose between, well, no, I shouldn't say that. I think it's important. My favorite producers I've worked with have always been like drum focused ones that understood like how to speak my language. I think the end result was always infinitely better, at least from my perspective. What I was going to say is I think it's maybe more important to understand rhythm than melody, but I only say that because I understand rhythm better than melody myself, and I don't really think that's true. But I think it's helpful to know both.
Yeah. And I think something that I've been observing and kind of developing as a theory in my head, just from like anecdotal experience, drummers that I know who are good drummers and have transitioned into music production or playing keys or whatever else,
Yeah.
that usually goes down better than having a
Yeah.
keyboardist trying to move into a rhythm section type of a thing. It just doesn't.
Agreed.
The feel is off. It just doesn't work as well. But I think if you train yourself to be a great drummer, that translates very well to the keyboard and music production, certainly,
Mm-hmm.
especially with the technology we have and the sounds we have at our disposal. If
Yeah.
if you can really lock down the rhythm aspect of music, then you do have I'd say a far stronger gateway into
Mm-hmm.
the melodic stuff. But yeah, there's something about the kind of the vibe and the also understanding texture in terms of like drum sounds and percussion and
Yes.
yeah, I think it's
There's something I always think of like drummers have this ability to like construct things like on layers. I always think of like a singer or a singer songwriter type, like they're sort of like mystical or something to me. Like they're kind of floaty on the top, and I don't know. This is just how I visualize them in my head. Like when I'm writing something, I look at it like, okay, here's the bass layer, here's drums, and then now I can build on top of it. And I feel like I've talked to other drummers that have transitioned into production, because I think if you want to stay in this industry, it's kind of a necessity to do that at some point to understand the production side of it. I think it's really helpful, but I do similarly that it is like this construction, this like base layer, next layer, next layer, next layer. And I don't know what that is, but that is definitely a common thing that I've felt from other drummers too.
yeah. I think some of it must come from the fact that a drum kit essentially consists of all the different areas of the full frequency spectrum. So
Right.
the kick is obviously down in the low end. Then you have toms, which sort of reside in the lower mids, and then you have snare and so forth. And you go into cymbals, which
Mhm.
vary in brightness, but that kind of inherently builds an understanding of the spectral aspect of music.
Totally.
And if you're a
Mhm.
pianist, obviously you have a low end, you have a high end, you have mids, but also the richness of the texture, or the should I say the contrast between the the individual elements isn't
Mhm.
as high, because a piano sounds like a piano whether you play it from the low end to the
Yeah.
high end. But a drum kit is literally different drums and different cymbals
Mhm.
that you're utilizing. So I think that kind of
Yeah.
creates a more of a modular environment.
You're totally right. And as you were saying, I remember hearing Dave Grohl talk about that too, where I think he related his guitar playing to how he played drums. I forget which song he was referencing. Like, it might have been like The Pretender or something. And he was talking about the guitar part, basically writing it from a drummer perspective. And I think he writes a lot of things like that. And it was like having this bass layer, then having the hi hat be the thing on top or whatever. And it made so much sense in my head when he said that. Like, God, I totally relate to that. That's how I conceive of music too. So it's fascinating. I think everybody's like fundamental approach to what they see in their head, whether it's like what their DAW looks like when they make music, or like if they're just going on their voice memos or whatever, how they're recording it, how they're conceiving of it. It's always been so fascinating to me.
Yeah, I've seen that same clip, and I remember thinking the same thing as well,
Yeah.
because it's like I do remember he talked about it in a very rhythmic way, and kind of breaking down the kind of something hi hat like into a snare
Yeah.
and a
What
kick.
song was it? Do you remember?
No, I think you might be right about the Pretender, but because it
I
kind
gotta
of
look it up.
has it has an interesting kind of that rhythmical pattern,
Mhm.
but I'm not sure. Maybe I'll dig it up and put it into the links.
Okay, sounds good.
But yeah, um, was there any sort of you talked about identity and how that links to being a musician. Was there any kind of a single point where you realized that music or being creative was what you wanted to do in life? Like, was there a single moment, or was it like a gradual process, or was it something that was always there?
Um, God, it's kind of like it's a two part. I think it's a two-part answer. I think initially I didn't when I started playing drums and getting into bands, I was creative to a certain extent, but I'm also fulfilling the role of a drummer in that I'm like, okay, here's this band, here's this song, I'll contribute, sure. But at the end of the day, I'm sort of beholden to these other people involved, and I will do my best to make this thing better. And that is different than what I do now, which is like I don't report to anybody. I don't really collaborate with anybody. And that's somewhat intentional because I got really tired of being creative in the way that was like of service to other people. Whereas now I get to make music. I mean, it's instrumental stuff, but I get to make these instrumental tracks. I get to make these videos that complement them, and I get to design my own website and come up with these sample libraries and then piece them together. And that kind of creativity is something I'm like just kind of learning now, which is like understanding my process and how I make music and even what like my melodies sound like and shit. And that's something I've learned much later in life. But when I was just playing in bands, I was just like constantly frustrated all the time that I couldn't fully exert my whatever's inside of me, whatever I'm trying to get out. And this is something I've totally pieced together again, looking back like 10, 15 years and being like, oh, I was uncomfortable or insecure because like I just wasn't letting the stuff out of me that I wanted to get out of me. So being creative now, being um, having nobody between me and the end product is very gratifying. And I really like the position I'm in now versus just being a drummer in a band, which I honestly don't know if I could go back to unless I absolutely loved everybody involved.
Yeah.
I
I
don't even care how much you pay me. I don't think I could do it.
Yeah. That sounds strikingly similar to my
Does
past.
it?
Yeah. Yeah, because like um I love working with other people when it really clicks, like the chemistry when it's right.
Mm-hmm.
It is easy and it is very pleasant, but I think for me that happens like it requires certain types of people, and it is more rare than I well, it is rare. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And for me, like I've been blessed. Like growing up, I was working with a bunch of really talented musicians, and I learned a ton from them. But I was simultaneously emotionally kind of suffocating because I wasn't doing my thing. And I've
Yeah.
always been someone who had to do their own thing. So for me,
Did
maybe
you
for
know that at the
um
time?
I think on an emotional level, yeah, but
Yeah.
articulating that practically to myself, no. And I think I was kind of adjusting myself too much in relation to other people, accommodating, their emotional space and their ideas, and I
Mhm.
wasn't as assertive as what would have been good for me. So
Mm.
I only started really doing my thing after the age of like, I don't know, 20 or something like that.
Mhm.
Um, so, but it comes with positives and negatives. Like I learned so much from these guys, but simultaneously the music we were making didn't really belong to me, and it
Mm.
I didn't feel certainly fulfilled in the process because I felt like there was a bit maybe too much ego in there, and I'm very I'm fine with people having big egos, but if it's not managed, then it becomes very suffocating to me. Like
Yeah.
I like when people give space to other people, and
Yeah.
so
What
yeah.
what was it? I'm curious how the ego manifested for these people around you. Was it like creative, or did it go into other areas?
You know, I don't think there was anything inherently, I'd say, bad or malicious about it. Like I genuinely think it's a matter of temperament. Like the matter of my chemistry meeting someone else's chemistry, and it just grinded in a very corrosive way ultimately to,
Mm.
for me, because I never really felt like I could be creatively open in that collaboration.
Mhm.
And I don't think it's anyone's fault. I think it was kind of just a bad match in that way,
Yeah.
which is why I think I should have just gone on my own journey earlier and be sort of more assertive with that.
Yeah.
But
Feel that.
yeah, but again, I'm super grateful for those times because I learned so much. Like they were insanely talented and creative people. Um, but yeah, chemistry is huge, and that's important to understand because nothing might be wrong otherwise in terms of that collaboration. Like it might not be like a toxic environment. It's simply like, does it feel good? Yeah, like does it
Yeah.
click properly and naturally? And if it does, then great. But if not, then maybe it's time to do something else, or certainly try and
Yeah.
talk about it. But
I'm
yeah,
always astounded at musicians' ability to like work so hard at stuff that doesn't need to be hard. Like being in bands especially too, you're devoting so much time and energy and resources to even just like play a show or whatever. Like I don't think most people understand how difficult it is to just get your stuff together and go play a show and prepare for it and do all that. Like it's and not get paid for it. and that's like status quo. And that after like so many years is so hard, and then it becomes sort of ingrained, like, oh, this is just impossibly difficult, and that's just what it is. And then I think when you start going rogue or on your own or figuring out what it is that you like, and then it becomes easy. And then it's like, oh, this was here all along. Like I could just make a living in this industry. I mean, it's not like it's easy, but once you get to a point where you can kind of look back and you're like, oh my God, I worked so hard to make no money for so long. And if you're lucky enough to get to a point where you're actually sustainable in this industry, it's like winning the lottery. And when the amount of effort feels appropriate and the amount of like resistance feels appropriate, is like so liberating and freeing. And I've finally, I think, gotten to that point after almost 20 years of suffering, it feels like. And I don't know if that's unique to this industry, or I don't know, maybe that's just life in general, but the music industry especially is so good at just like churning people up. It's tough.
Yeah.
I think we can all relate too. It's just like every musician I know that is still working, that is my age, is has been through so much.
Yeah. Yeah, I know I have a bunch of friends who are in bands right now. And most of them are probably around the same age as I am. So, 30, give or take a couple of years or a few years.
Yeah.
And I am as well, like, continuously just astounded how much effort and time they put into it.
Mm-hmm.
And not really seeing how the output of that justifies it. Obviously, this is a subjective call. Like, I'm not judging anyone's decisions or what they want to do. And obviously, you get so much out of being a band, other than the monetary or whatever other gains you make from the band. Like, that's a family, and that can be like a very important part of your life. But
Mm-hmm.
but I know exactly what you mean. Obviously, I haven't experienced success on a level that you've done with Circles, for example, or with your band. But still, like, to me, like, being a composer and doing what I do is a very lean operation, and it's kind of an efficient operation. Like, I know that I can go into the studio and make progress today, and I see a direct relationship between an input and an output, and it feels very good, and I can get so much done. Whereas with a band, like, it's a lot of, like, the more people you have involved, the longer things take. Like, things become infinitely more complex as you begin to add people, getting them to the same place, and managing chemistry and mindset and motivation and whatever else. Like, it's a massive undertaking, and I really actually look up to a lot of the mental strength that a lot of these people have, because it is tough to have a functioning and successful band, or at least a band that's trying to become successful. Like, it's a massive undertaking. I think it's drastically underestimated how difficult and taxing it is. And I wouldn't, like, I still want to play live shows sometime in the future, as soon as I get my singer-songwriter stuff figured out. But I'm not going to do that if there's no money involved. Like, I would not feel good about taking guys on stage at this stage without any money. So I would have to see some kind of success first, purely with the music, and then we can look at the live stuff. But yeah,
so hard. Is what went on in Finland over the past couple of years? Was it like were things open? Like, can you go play show like right now, or
nope, it's been basically shut down for the entire time. And I have a lot of friends who are in the music industry, so locally in Finland, doing it professionally, and it's not good.
Really?
they don't have a job essentially. They can't play any gigs, and they are being quite loud about it, which is good,
Mm.
obviously.
Yeah.
But I don't know. The government seems to be completely unaware of how the culture industry works as a whole. Like, how does
Yeah.
music work? How do venues work? They just don't seem to
Mm.
understand the importance and the value of that. But I don't know. I hope they can get back into making a living soon. But it's hasn't
Yeah.
been good.
Is Finland's approach different than Sweden or Norway? Like, are you guys similar culturally and politically, or is it pretty drastically different?
I'd say in some ways it's rather different. I mean, obviously, like usually, like we're part of the Nordic countries, which are usually like Finland, Sweden, Norway, Denmark,
Mhm.
uh, maybe Iceland. I'm not sure, but then you have Scandinavia, which is Sweden, Norway, Denmark, and maybe Iceland. I'm sorry, I don't remember. But anyway,
Yeah.
that Scandinavia is very much more alike than what Finland is similar to them. But in many
Okay.
ways, like maybe some food aspects of the culture are similar. The language is completely different. Um, so
Your English is amazing, by the way.
no, thanks. It's you can well, I can thank my father for that. So
Really?
yeah, he speaks nothing but English to me. So
Really? Interesting.
yeah, it's a bit of a long story, but I guess condensed is that he's an English teacher, and he
Oh, okay.
read this weird study at some point before my brother and I was born, that if you just speak a language to a kid, it can be multiple languages. They just learn
Mhm.
how it works, and he hasn't spoken a word of Finnish to either one of us ever since. So
No shit, really?
yeah,
I wish my parents would have done that with some language other than English.
yeah. Well, that's what almost everyone says when I share that story,
I'm sure.
and it's
Yeah.
like I'm so grateful, um, especially because English for me seems to be not seems to be it is more like I find it way more comfortable than Finnish.
Really?
Yeah, like Finnish feels a bit awkward in the mouth, but and
Uh,
also like creatively, English is a lot. It's just better for me, like in terms of
yeah.
writing lyrics or whatever else. So
Is it helpful in the music industry to speak to be as fluent as you are in English in any way?
um, do you mean like in what sort of a way?
I don't know. I'm just trying to think like um, we've been Circles has been working with this design company in Berlin and a coder in Stockholm, and they're both they're both born and raised in their respective countries, and both speak English so well, and speak English design so well, where it's like they're they're converting this creative language in their head of like maybe they have a German word for it or whatever, but they're translating it to English. Like this is the opacity of this doesn't really match the functionality over here, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm like, every time I talk to them, I'm like, I'm so amazed that you're able to translate these high level creative design ideas through German language first and then into English. Maybe because I'm not bilingual, I don't understand. Maybe this is easier than than I think it is. But to me, I'm astounded by it, and that they're able to do this. And the only way that we're able to work with them is because they've accommodated our language. The American English language is the only reason they're able to work with us. And so it's like if they just spoke German, this whole thing wouldn't work. We couldn't work with them. And so I don't know. I'm just fascinated by people that are able to speak multiple languages.
yeah, I think the main obviously well, not perhaps not obviously, but to my understanding, the biggest benefit is just how it helps with a bunch of brain development stuff. So
Like,
I think the research on that is rather clear. So that's really the biggest benefit. Obviously, then you have the practical benefit of speaking the languages. But for me, unfortunately, like I don't do a bunch of stuff that is very kind of local in Finland. And
Okay.
honestly, a lot of the cultural things in Finland are kind of far away from what I like to do. You know, the aesthetics of the culture and what people enjoy and want to listen to. I don't like to write lyrics in Finnish, so there's not a lot of stuff there that I can leverage specifically.
Yeah.
But otherwise, Finnish is a beautiful language, and it is a very difficult language. So it's, I think, probably learning both has been a very big blessing. But yeah, I think the more languages you can speak, obviously that's better for brain development. But you know, if you know some languages that are perhaps more useful than Finnish at a global scale, that's obviously better.
Right.
Yeah, like Spanish or Chinese or something like that. So
Yeah, I don't know any other languages. I mean, in America, well, at least in most, it seems like most parts of the US, there's like, you're kind of required to take a couple, 2 or 3, 4 years of a language or whatever. And most people end up taking Spanish and French or whatever. And then it's just lost. We just lose it all completely. Like everybody I know, I don't know anybody that can speak a fluent second language. I don't think. Maybe like 1 or 2 people. And that's got to seem so ridiculous to everyone in Europe that it's sort of, I don't know, it seems like the standard to be able to speak more than one language or at least understand it. When I went to Italy for our honeymoon, this was like 10 years ago, we went to Rome, and then we went to Tuscany and Venice. And I had this CD, it was like the Berlitz CD that's like learn Italian. And so I didn't read or write or like learn specific words. I just listened to this CD and copied these phrases basically. Like, can you recommend a hotel, or what's what is where's the bathroom? I would like an espresso, et cetera, et cetera. Just the basic dumb shit. And I'd learned it so well because I think being a musician had helped me like, mouth it out and like basically pretend I was Italian. I learned it so well that they'd respond back to me in Italian, and I would have no fucking clue what they were saying. But like, it was, I think they appreciated it, my effort, but I knew those phrases so well that I could say it, but I couldn't comprehend it necessarily. That's the closest I got, I think, to learning a second language.
Yeah. Oh, it's definitely useful, and hopefully for most people they're not Finnish because the utility of that is pretty limited. But yeah, it is a beautiful language. Like otherwise, yeah, it's. I mean, I think Tolkien, when he created the Elvish language for Lord of the Rings, I think a big chunk of that is based on Finnish.
Really?
So if you pronounce it in a soft enough way, then maybe you could, be considered an elf in some parts of the world. I don't know. But also you can speak Finnish in a very kind of raw and brutal way. Like there's a lot of consonants, so like R's and K's and T's and stuff. So you can make it aggressive sounding as well.
That's so funny.
There's this good video where there's a old guy living in the woods in a cabin, and there's a bear outside, and the bear is going through his trash, and the guy opens up the window and shouts "perkele," which basically is like this. It's like the common. It's like saying "God damn it" or something, but it's like this famous Finnish curse word, and the bear gets so scared, like it runs into the woods, and it's like, what the fuck was that?
So that's the trick. So when I run into a bear here, I just say that. Yeah,
you should shout "perkele," and it's gonna work every single time.
That's amazing.
Yeah. If I try and wrap up the kind of the early part of your life here, I keep asking this question. I'm not sure if it's a good one, but I'll keep doing it anyway. So I have this kind of theory that people who end up being creatives, they sort of retain something from their childhood. Maybe it's open-mindedness. Maybe it's this sort of, I don't know. I guess open-mindedness is the best way of putting it. And you're capable of bringing that into your adulthood. So do you think that sort of applies to you? And maybe like you could talk a bit about what kind of a kid you were overall speaking, like personality wise. And if this applies to you, then how did you kind of manage to bring that into where you are right now?
That's a great question. I was definitely a creative kid. Like, my dad recently made this, this was actually some time ago. This was right before my wife and I got married, and we had this big like party at my parents' house. My dad had made this video from all this footage that I had taken with a video camera from when I was a kid. And I was making all of these little movies. I was filming myself play the piano and playing drums and little skits. And like, it was so fucking embarrassing, but it reminded me that like, oh, I've always been like the same. Like I literally do that same shit today, where it's like my whole job is predicated on making little movies, and you know, it's Instagram videos and like playing drums, and like it makes me laugh at myself and laugh at my occupation now, because it's like I've been doing this my whole life. It's just now it's like I've learned to monetize it. But looking back, I was definitely free. I was free to create, and I was free to have that space to do that. And I'm really lucky I had that. And my parents definitely encouraged it too. So yeah, I think a lot of what happened is in my older life was trying to get back into that space that I was when I first started making and creating stuff. Like, I think I got corrupted midlife a little bit in you know, like we were talking about, like being in bands, and also just like being a teenager, like is hard enough, and then you're thinking about all this other shit, like, you know, girls and school, and then you start smoking weed or whatever, and then you sort of like lose, at least for me, like I feel like I lost this middle gap in my life that was like I was super creative and weird and dorky, and then like puberty hit, and I was like, oh no, like I gotta be cool now and be like everybody else, blah blah blah. And then now I'm like, no, I gotta rediscover like what I actually am, what I like to make. And I still feel young in that. And I do feel like I lost like this middle portion. But early on, I definitely had the freedom to express myself. And that was made evidently clear in this hugely embarrassing video that my dad put together of me just being a kid. So it was interesting to see.
Yeah. It's that purity of essence. Like that's, I don't know. Yeah. Cool.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's finally jump into circles, drum samples a bit more. There are many people out there, you know, musicians, entrepreneurs who are thinking about doing something similar. Hopefully a few of them are watching this podcast, but we'll have to see. Maybe we could sort of go through the journey of it. I think there's going to be a lot of utility for people. And there seems to be, you know, unfortunately little content around, you know, these kind of journeys or processes. So hopefully we can amend a bit of that. But so you started Circles in 2016, but yeah, but when did you first sort of get the idea for it? Was there like an immediate moment of realization, or was it again like a gradual process? Obviously you have to acquire skills and knowledge over time, but was there like a moment when it sort of lightning struck from the sky, and did you kind of realize you wanted to do it, or was it again like a gradual thing?
No, it was very intentional. So I had two ideas of like creative ventures that I wanted to do. One was this like I had this idea for an iOS app, mobile app. The other was this drum sample library, and they're both sort of like rhythm centric, drum focused stuff. And it was like, okay, I'm kind of an audio engineer. I'm a drummer. I kind of want to do one of these things and just see how it goes. My first sort of creative, entrepreneurial venture. And I on two big sketch pads I like wrote out the sort of the plan for the mobile app. And then on the other one, I wrote the plan for the drum sample library. And I presented them both to my wife. And I was like, okay, so like, here's this idea. Here's this one. Like, which one should I do? What do you think? And as I was presenting it, I'm going to do the drum sample thing. Like, I think I can do this. And I think I can make it work. And I was surprised by that because I'd spent all this time and energy working on this mobile app idea and talking to developers and stuff. And it just wasn't right for the time. So I decided to do the drum sample thing. And so from there, it was like, okay, so I'm broke. I am actually in debt. So how do I pay for this? How much is it going to cost? How do I pay for this? And how am I logistically going to do it? And I had to teach myself how to do everything too, because at this point, I don't think I'd even programmed drums like once. I was a drummer, so I never had to do that. So I had to teach myself basically everything. And so from there, it was getting money. It was like, okay, I think I needed about 25,000 to do everything like right. But that includes everything. That includes the recording. That includes paying me minimum wage, below minimum wage, probably like $1 an hour at the end of it, probably less. Website, graphic design, buying all the programs I need, buying the hardware I need, renting a studio. It's funny. I actually lived in LA during this time when I started Circles. I lived in Los Angeles, had a studio, had a drum set. I'm an able-bodied drummer, and I didn't do any session work. I didn't do like barely any. I didn't do any tours, didn't play any shows, and it was like the weirdest time to be in LA for that because I'm paying this crazy rent for a studio and an apartment, and I'm just like, no, I'm gonna do my own thing that I could do anywhere, but I'm just happen to be in LA. It was really silly looking back on it, but I'd spent all this time researching everything, and so going back, I knew I needed money, so I had to borrow money. I had to borrow 25,000. Called Andrew Berlin, who's a friend and mix engineer, audio engineer here in town at the Blasting Room, which is a studio Circles has done basically everything at, and said, hey, I want to do the sample library. Can you help me do it? Let me book 2 weeks with you. And that was however much 2 weeks costed a studio. It was a lot. Went in there, recorded a bunch of drums, didn't really know what I was doing, but recorded in like 3 different rooms. It was exhausting. Like I wasn't sleeping very well. I had a video guy come in on day like 9 or 10 and like just film me and do like an interview and stuff. And I look back on the footage and I was like, I just look so exhausted and so wrecked. And it was hard. The whole experience was hard. It was expensive. Didn't know what I was doing. I left the studio with this hard drive just full of drum samples. And I'm like, okay, well, like now what the fuck do I do?
I bet you walked really carefully with that one.
I did, yes. Yeah, it was weird to walk away with that because I'm like, okay, I've got like $25,000 worth of stuff on this hard drive. Went back home to LA and started just parsing through stuff. YouTube University for things I didn't understand, whether it was like contact library stuff or building website stuff or marketing. I learned it all on my own. Didn't really have anybody to help me through that. and launched in, I guess it was 2016 or 17, I can't remember. And I had all these financial projections of what the company was going to do, you know, because I'm going to put out a product and I'm going to make, if everything adds up, like, oh, I'm going to make $100,000 on this. Like, no problem. Like, look at the projections. They're right here. So of course I put it out and it doesn't do anything. Like, nobody gives a shit. I sold, I think it was like one library for like $60, and I sold maybe two or three in the first day, and they were my friends that just bought it because they felt bad for me. And then it was like maybe once a day somebody would download something, or maybe a week would go by and then some guy would come in and download it. And so the first year I was like, I don't know how much Circles made, a couple thousand, right, total, which isn't nothing, but it wasn't sustainable. And so then made a second library, called that one Garage, and that's when my buddy Tyler came up to my garage and we just recorded a bunch of really great sounding drums here, and in an attempt to sort of right the wrongs of the previous library, or what I thought were wrongs, which was like not getting enough samples, not making enough cohesive virtual instruments of the drums, and having that be really useful in a programmer or sort of a sampler environment. So very deep sampled, and had my friend Jason Livermore, who mixes like Rise Against and Descendants and stuff. Great mixing engineer. He mixed it, and I was like, okay, the first library didn't go, but number two, this fucker's gonna go. And put it out, and nothing really happened again. And I tried running these ads for it, and it was like, it just wasn't really going. You know, it was a struggle to make it profitable, basically. So we have library one, library two, did a third library, did a fourth library. This is when we went out in the desert and recorded in the desert for stuff. And then I sampled this Wurlitzer Sideman, which is like one of the world's first drum machines. And so we got four libraries, and they're doing okay. Like things are going okay.
And what was the year at this point? Like, how much time had passed?
This was probably 2018, like mid 2018, 2019. So it'd been off and on. I was also working another job part-time remotely. So, you know, been about two and a half years or something like that. And then at this point though, it's like, okay, I wasn't making that much money, but it wasn't nothing. It was still, I forget how much it was, but it was enough to be like, oh, that's a good side hustle. Like, this is bringing in some little extra income every year, and it's helping pad and helping me pay for rent and stuff. And that was nice. And the other part that's nice was not nice, but it was helpful to see this progress where, you know, every library wasn't blowing up. I wasn't going crazy, but I could see, like, over time, like, okay, the revenue is going up. Like, the trajectory is good here. Like, in maybe 5 years, this will be sustainable if I keep doing it. But I was getting very burnt out at this point too. It was very similar to the thing that had happened earlier in my life, where I was like getting jaded about music again. And that was really hard. But the thing that changed everything was this library called Dead that we put out in May. It was May 2019. And it happened on a whim. My sister was having a baby shower here in Fort Collins, and I was living in Pittsburgh at this point. And I flew back here, and they had just opened up this new room at the Blasty Room Studios here in Fort Collins. And it was this small room, probably about the size of the room I'm in now, just like it's called like Studio C. And it was a John Brandt design, who's this great room designer. And Andrew was like, hey, we haven't recorded drums in here. Do you want to come in and record some drums in here? We'll do like a little mini sample library. I was like, that sounds fucking awesome. Let's do that. So I came in for 3 days. It was the chillest thing I've ever done. It was just me and Andrew. I had my friends come in. My sister came in. We're just like, hey, what's up? You know, like pouring mezcal. We're just fucking around, really. And did the library, and I was like, that was fun. Like, this probably isn't gonna do anything. I'll put it out anyways. I'll make it cheap too. I'll make it like $35. Whatever, fuck it, you know. And so I put together this really fun like little video for it, and it had this really catchy like bass line. And when we recorded, I had all these GoPros, so I was able to put together this like catchy looking fun video for it. I was like, this is just fun, you know, like so I'm just screwing around. It's like the first library I had fun with. Put that out, and day one was like $1,000 in sales. And I was like, oh, okay, that's different. Day two was like 1,100 in sales. Day three was like 900 in sales. And then it continued that way for like a week. And it was like something like that. And it was like, did I just make $7,000 in 7 days? That's more than I made the entirety of last year. And so that's when like everything changed after that. And it was definitely a fluke, but it pointed to like something else. It pointed to like, you kind of have to have your ducks in a row for this shit. You have to have, the product has to be really good, and you have to spend time making sure that it's good. You have to relate that to people. People need to understand that this is really good. They have to be willing to pay $35, which may not seem like a lot, but it's a lot to musicians. They have to want to pay this, and they have to feel like they're getting value out of it. And like, I didn't know I was doing that at the time, but it was apparent when that amount of people decided to give me that amount of money, and it added up to this greater sum, which is now sustainable to it's my job now. But I had to have that experience. It's kind of like getting a record deal. It's like, this was so unexpected, but it taught me that there's actually a future here, and this is sustainable. So from that dead library on, like everything has changed.
Isn't that kind of interesting how, like, obviously there were many factors and all of the work that you had done prior to releasing Dead one, but how, like, you described that the process was very kind of natural and laid back and sort of, shooting from the hip. So it's kind of like, do you have any, did you learn something about that process that you've taken, forward from there? Like, is there like an approach to your sessions now, or like a mental approach at the very least of like, I guess staying relaxed and doing things for the fun of it as well?
Yes, it is good. It's really good to have fun. It sounds so dumb to say that out loud, but it's like, it helps just kind of lube everything up a little bit. Like, if you're having fun, there's no stress, and there shouldn't be, because it's like what I do is so ridiculous anyways. Like, when I really think about what I do, I'm like, I laugh about it all the time. I'm like, this is the most ridiculous job ever. Like, the shit I do is so stupid sometimes. And so if I bring that in a less self-deprecating way, but if I bring that mentality in, it's really helpful. But I will say, I'm also really bad at doing that. I struggle to have fun in these sessions because I'm like, I'm the CEO, I'm the owner, like, this is going to reflect on me. Like, I need to make sure this product's really good. But it's like that mentality never helps anything. It's always so much better to be free and to be loose. And as much of that you can bring in with your, I don't want to call it professionalism, but with your sort of like, your ability to know what you need to get, what you need to walk away with from the studio. And if you can have fun, is the perfect pieces.
Yeah, it's definitely a tricky balance, because you do have these responsibilities and like a schedule running, money's running, and you need to make sure that it happens. Do you handle the management to make sure that all the samples are recorded as they should be? Do you have someone else doing that for you now, or do you still do it yourself? And do you think if you didn't do it yourself, could you kind of be more, I guess, laid back or free to
Yeah.
do what it is that you need to do, which is play drums and hopefully, I don't know, have fun if possible.
What I would like to do, and I'll answer that question in a second, but what I would like to do is just, I want all my tasks to be creative. I don't want them to be repetitive and mundane. And so I do all the editing, and I do all the chopping of samples, all the editing, all the naming, all the bouncing, all the presets, for the most part, is all me. And those tasks I don't really want to do anymore because they're so time consuming. And now I can actually afford to pay somebody to do those other things. But before that, and still, I'm still working through this. And I don't think this struggle is solely my own, because I've heard other company owners talk about this, where it's like, it's hard to give up control over some of these elements, because part of what makes circles good, in my opinion, is attention to these little details that I've been able to learn how to do over so many years. Like in terms of loops or sample world editing, there's a very specific way that those loops should be edited to feel human. How they loop together, the loopability of a loop, the way it's named, just how it's cut. Did you cut at the right part of the transient? Did you move it a little bit this way? How are the fades on this? Like, did you fade too quickly? And you don't hear it here, but once it gets compressed or distorted, you're going to hear that. And the levels, the phase, there's all these little things that I'm basically an expert in at this point. That if I can call myself that, a sample expert, that I've learned to do, that I am scared to give that up. But at the same time, I can't do all the shit I want to do if I'm editing all the time. I just can't. Like, editing takes forever. So I'd love to hire somebody to do that. And that's the struggle I'm at now, where it's not, the business is coasting, everything's going well, but now I need people to help me do stuff. I need employees. I need to hire people. That's my struggle for this year, has been getting over that hump myself, and learning how to trust other people and find them and hire them and pay them.
Yeah, it's certainly difficult, but like if you have the right person, that's really the only thing you need. The only problem is that finding the right person is a huge undertaking. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think that this is probably like a good point to maybe talk a bit about like the dead sample library line, mm-hmm. which is pretty clear to me that, like, I don't know anything about your numbers or anything, but it seems to me, only based on even that people, if they look at some of my videos that I've done, the dead mm-hmm. sample libraries are like, I don't know, many times what the other ones get. So right. It seems like they are your most successful product line.
They are the bread and butter. I'll be doing dead libraries until I'm 50 years old.
Good. Sounds perfect. Because they are getting better all the time. So like, I mean, volume 1 was already good, but like, it's like I said in the videos, like, to me, it seems like they're just maturing and, and you know, mm-hmm. addressing the things that I feel like needed to be addressed. But
well, that's good. It's good to hear.
Yeah, it's really good stuff. But like, I wanted to maybe hear your thoughts on why they are so liked and why they are so successful. Mm-hmm. Because this is like, I've been wanting to have dead drum samples for years. Like, not only because you can then control the reverb, mm-hmm. but just the sound of it. Like, that's an artistic choice. Like, I like when things are very intimate and you can get close to them. Mm-hmm. And that's what I've been looking for, not only in drum samples, but in basically any samples that mm-hmm. I might be after. You know, that's probably one of the aspects, but why do you think they are so successful? Is it that sort of creative tonal thing that is speaking to people? And well, I guess that's the question.
Yeah. I've thought about it too, because like I said, when I launched it, I was surprised at the reaction it got, and had wished that I'd spent more time on it, because there's so much to explore there that at the time I was like, whatever, I'll just put this out. This library's not going to do anything. And then it does, and then it's still selling to this day. And I think there's a lot of things that you touched on that are the reason it is so popular. I think people that are musicians and producers and work with samples all the time know that it's better to have a dead, dry sound, whatever it is, to be able to process themselves. It's much more advantageous to have that. That's part of it. But I think that's more like upper level thinking too. It's like a little too heady approach. I think there's another angle in here that's like, I think the branding is interesting. It's just like dead. I know people know what dead drum sounds are, but I don't think anybody's like thrust the marketing upon them like we have on Instagram for dead drum samples. So I think the marketing is good, and I also think it's just like the sounds themselves, especially Dead Volume 2, which I think is our most popular selling library, one of them. Between Dead 2, Dead 1975, and Dead Volume 1 are the top selling libraries, but I think Dead Volume 2 is the most popular, and some of the drum sounds in that are just like legitimately alien. They almost sound like digital or just foreign. They sound different. They don't sound like a Steven Slate drum sound, or an Addictive Drums drum sound, or a Get Good drums, or something you'd find on Splice, or that sound. Like they're just kind of distinct in their own thing, and they have this branding behind it, and they usually have these videos behind it that I'll make. And so I think it's a package of all of it together that I've stumbled upon and tried to improve upon, but it definitely is distinct, and always trying to make it better, give it the life that it deserves. Like with Dead Volume 2, it was like I spent months working on that thing and making a video that I thought would really do it justice. So part of it is that too, is just trying to breathe life into these things and make sure that people resonate with that. But at the end of the day, also making sure the product is fucking rad too. So that's always part of it. So I think it's multi-faceted reason why it does so well. And I'm still surprised it does so well. And I'm surprised people haven't tried to copy exactly that method. I'm surprised I haven't seen more other dead libraries yet.
That was kind of going to be the extension of the first question, because I'm pretty well aware, as I'm sure you are as well, of the other stuff that's out there. Yeah. And it's genuinely quite difficult to find drum samples that are so, dead or controlled as yours are. And that obviously plays a role in why they are so successful for circles, because it just isn't out there. And this is something that I've wanted to have ever since I started making music. And maybe you have some thoughts about why that is. Like why isn't anyone else attempting to do that? It doesn't make any sense to me, but maybe you have some ideas about that.
I've definitely thought about this too, and it scares me because I know people are going to try and do it as well. I even tried to get Dead trademarked. I went to I'm giving away all my secrets on this podcast.
Well, I mean, I don't want you to say anything that would hinder what you're doing. So please don't say anything you're not comfortable saying. So,
totally. Yeah. I'll throw this out there. I don't think this is the problem. Where I try to get a trademark, and I ran into all this trouble because of the band Grateful Dead. Apparently, is extremely litigious when it comes to anything that is like dead related, and especially with music. And I was talking to this attorney about it, and I never put that together that somebody would associate Grateful Dead with dead drum samples. But now I'm like, oh, interesting. That's a fascinating tidbit. But yeah, I'm just as surprised as you are that this doesn't these dead drum samples don't exist um, at, in as many places as they probably should, which is good for us because we can kind of, we can run with this for a while. But I think it's because like people think that drums need to be like banging, like this has to be like, basically it's always like when the levee breaks. It's like, God, big fucking drums in a hallway or something is like, that's kind of what everybody generally thinks of like badass sounding drums. And you see that, and you see sort of like rock music guiding this drum, especially virtual instrument world. It's like we're still stuck in this antiquated like rock drum set mentality. Like when you open an Addictive Drums or an Easy Drummer or Steven Slate stuff, it's like it's usually like rock centric still. Like there's still like ride and crash and splash and do stuff, and that's changing. And there's more options now, but I think it's still kind of stuck in that world of like drums should be big, like L.A. room, Ocean Way, like big, big, big. But there's that's not really functional, and it's not really part of the sound, the modern sound, so much anymore. It ebbs and it flows like all things, but yeah, I was just as surprised as you are that there's not more dead stuff in general, dead usable stuff. Even like when I'll go on Splice and look at stuff in general, it's all very, very hyped and very processed. And part of that is like I think people wanna sell it and wanna show that this, like, this hits, but it's not always functional in the end. And I think more people are starting to realize that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's even with some of the sample libraries that are relatively controlled, but you can still hear a lot of the room in there,
Yeah.
which, isn't good or bad. It's just what it is. But
Right.
but there's definitely like I haven't done any sampling. Well, I've done very little sampling, let's put it that way. But trying to me, it seems like if you wanted to do what you're doing with Dead, it's much more than just being in a very absorbent, heavy room. Like when I play your libraries, there's a sense of tangibility, and it's not only the lack of reverb, but there's like a certain intimate presence and weight to the sound, and nothing is truly completely void of reverb, because reverb, well, sound travels in air, and that's what sound is.
Right.
So everything has some kind of ambience at least.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like it's far more difficult than just going in a completely dead room and recording the kit. Like it seems you can capture this kind of presence and intimacy to it. So it seems like it's to me, it seems like it's far more complex than just going into a dead room. And also you need to understand the sound of it. Like you need to artistically understand the appeal of it, and how what makes it work well, instead of simply booking a dead room and recording a drum kit. Like that's not going to be enough, because in my estimation, what speaks in your libraries to people is the specific tonal coloring of it and the texture. So it is far more complex than just the lack of reverb.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, it would be hard. Even it is hard. It is hard to like find the. It seems like it should be simpler. I guess I agree with you. Like it seems like you should just be able to go into a room with some good mics, press record, and come out with something that sounds good. But it just doesn't. It takes so much. Like even like we are psychotic with dampening to like I said, we're psychotic with it. Like, so I do all the hitting of the drums, and I'm in there, and it's usually Andrew and Tyler on the other side of the window, and we'll be like, okay, try one moon gel, put the moon gel on the bottom, cut that moon gel in half, put it up there. Okay, no, try the tea towel, try the blanket, try the gaff tape. Okay, let's do half a gaff on top, one finger on the bottom, but when you hit the drum, slowly remove your finger. So it's like it's these crazy things we do to get like what the consensus is in the room of like the best sounding dead drums. And does that matter? Yes, but it is so it's like so mundane of a detail that we focus in on these dead things, because in a dead room, especially if it's a well-designed room, you hear everything. You hear every little rattle, and it is difficult to do. And I think whether or not people consciously know that or appreciate that, I think hopefully that translates and comes across in the end product that like these things do take a ridiculous amount of effort to truly make them sound dead.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's probably one of the most important things. Like you actually hear detail, like intense detail. And I'm like a detail addict. Like to me, every single tiny thing matters, or it kind of gives you a different color or different feel. So that's probably one of the things that is making it so appealing, and why probably a lot of people couldn't replicate it, because maybe there isn't like an understanding or taste for them to hear that.
Yeah.
Sort of going back to what you mentioned, you described the process of how circles grew and how it was kind of like at times kind of slow and sluggish. What were some of the kind of the mental states that you went through? Did you have some difficult mental spots in there, and how did you sort of what did you do? What did you utilize to get past kind of the gray, tedious stuff when it wasn't working?
Yeah, I think the hardest part of growing this company so far was when I lived in Pittsburgh. My wife was going to school there, and I had a studio there that was in this little town called Etna, and it was like a 10-minute drive from my house. But Pittsburgh is literally a dark place. Like it gets very few days of sunshine. It's rainy. It's bleak. It's depressing. It's like
Finland.
Yeah, I guess like Finland.
During winter, I must say.
Yes, right. But at least from what I understand, you guys have it seems like there's a culture there. There's a beauty in a lot of the architecture and stuff. Or I'm just thinking of Helsinki, pictures I've looked at before we talked today. But like it seems like you guys have a vibe about it, and you're all kind of in it together. Pittsburgh feels fractured. It feels like a leftover American city, and it's pretty fucked up. It's pretty dilapidated and dark, and a lot of people are sad there, and you can feel it. And maybe that's the same with these maybe it's the same in Finland. I don't know, but when I was there, was that coupled with trying to start a business and kind of eating shit doing it. And like I said, I was in this terrible studio. It was just like a big box with fluorescent lights, and I tried my best to make it vibey, but like there's like death metal bands next to me, like da, 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 da. And I'm like trying to putting on headphones, editing samples for the fourth library that hasn't sold anything, and I don't have any money. I'm in debt. I had taken out another loan to pay for stuff. That was a really dark time, and I didn't know how dark it was until I kind of got out of it. But that was hard. That was the hardest time by far, just for a lot of reasons. But like trying to grow a company in a place that is uninspiring while you're in debt is like a whole nother level of shit eating,
Yeah. Did you sort of did you apply anything consciously during that time period, or did you just kind of slug it out? Did you just grind through it, or was there anything that you deployed during that time that helped?
It's interesting. Um, it it moreover it was like determination. I don't even know if that's the right word. It's like it was just forward momentum. Even if it didn't feel like forward momentum, it's just like, okay, well, here's another day. Like I'm at the studio again. Like maybe I'll do something. And some days you don't, some days you do. And it was just like kind of one foot in front of the other, basically. But leaving there, leaving Pittsburgh and leaving that studio was really nice. It was a good feeling to leave that all behind, and it felt like I left the struggles of the business there as well. So changing of geographical location was helpful. But moreover, it was just like, just do the next thing, you know, just do the next thing. And I'm really good about doing something every day, going to the studio and just doing something, whatever it is. Like today, I'm going to update this spreadsheet. If that's all I do today, that's fine. Today, I'm going to not do anything. I'm going to be on Twitter all day. That's fine too. And I've learned to sort of accept these days of nothing that are not progress. That's been helpful. Just accept and move forward. I think that's the biggest thing I learned from that period.
Yeah. Well, it seems like that's really the skill that, or the approach that carried you through. And that's a lot of the time what I, if and when people ask for, help or anything from me, I usually try and, because I try and keep it practical, because a lot of people get caught up in the emotions, and
Yeah.
and it's really useful to remain practical regardless of what your emotions are. And
Mm-hmm.
even as you were going through that dark period, you just still did something, which eventually amounts to something. And even if you are in a dark place, that's what is going to get you out of it. And
Yeah.
and yeah, it's funny how, because I had like also like a dark period from, I don't know, maybe age of 22 to 23 to, I don't know, 25 or 6 or something like that. And
Mm-hmm.
my struggle was way more like mental. I was kind of, that was the time when I started my stuff as an entrepreneur. So obviously it was kind of difficult and taxing, but
Yeah.
more than anything else, it was mentally like a very dark place. And now when I look back at that time, I'm like, how did I like do that? How did I live through that kind of dark mental landscape?
Yeah.
Like, it seems so alien to me now.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, I was super dedicated on trying to fix my broken mental health. Like, I was kind of, well, fucked up in many ways, but I was really dedicated to finding myself in a better place. And I think it
Mm-hmm.
was the aggressiveness of that approach where I really said, like, I'm going to make it a priority to genuinely try and be a better person. uh,
Mm-hmm.
and I was really brutal about that, which made it very difficult and dark. But
Mm-hmm.
I now reap the benefits from that. Like, I don't have
Yeah.
to deal with that shit anymore. Like,
Yeah.
I've fortunately grown out of many of those flaws. But it's
It's
funny
a good
how,
place.
yeah, I mean, it was a dark time, but it was the best
Mhm.
investment of my life, like best
Yeah.
investment of effort. And
Yeah.
but it's interesting how you only see it in hindsight. Like,
Totally. Yeah. When you're in it, you're just like, oh, what is this? It's even when you're in it, it's even hard to conceive of how bad it is. Like it
mm,
sucks, but you're like, I don't know how much this sucks. I just know it sucks.
yeah, yeah. And for me, it was the same way. Like, I was always dedicated to just doing the next thing. Like, no matter what. Like, I'm just gonna do this thing no matter how I feel, and so forth.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of utility in learning that. And
Yeah. It's hard. That's such a hard thing to like if you don't have that in you, that like desire to do maybe not even desire, but just for me it felt I don't know if this was like it for you. it sounds like you have more, sounds like you had a lot of determination to better yourself, or um, like for me, a lot of it felt automatic, like out of my control a little bit. Like it was like, I'm going to the studio today to do something because I don't know what else to do, and it's like, I'm gonna do it. And it felt automatic, like whether that's me pushing myself through it, not realizing it, but a lot of it felt just sort of like kind of out of my control, where it's like, I don't know. I have to go forward. I don't even know what I'm doing, but I have to go forward, whatever forward means. But I know people don't. A lot of people don't have that, where it's like it just becomes a spiral. And I don't think I've ever been like depressed. Well, no, I've been depressed, but like I don't have that inescapable feeling of depression that I think I was close to. But I feel like I might have been close, and I think because I had that automatic tendency to just keep moving forward, I'm not dead or depressed for life, or medicated, or yeah, I don't know. But I think everybody has like their own version of the struggle, and like even in the entrepreneurial sense, I've read so many accounts of people talking about their own struggles with starting a business, and financially, and relationships, and anxieties, and all that stuff. But it's like everyone's on their own weird little journey and has their own version of the thing that they're going through. So it's like, it's when I was reading those things about founders' pains, none of them really truly resonated with me, because I'm like, well, my pain's different. Like, I don't know. It's just different. I don't relate to you. I understand. I'm sorry you're in pain. I understand you're in pain, but like the way I'm dealing with this is completely different. I think everybody has their own version of that, especially when it's like entrepreneurial or whatever you want to call it, business related, because there's so much shit tied up in it. It's like your income, your creativity, it's all just like constantly um, just there for disruption. It's there to be corrupted potentially. So it's like it's a wicked storm of shit for sure.
Yeah, and I think that's a super important point, because whenever I consult anyone or give advice on what to do, I always emphasize, like, don't focus on, if you focus on other people's situations, do it for the sake of learning, but don't do it for the sake of comparison, because you
Yeah.
always need to, whatever your situation is, that is your situation. You can only change it through action, but so many people get caught up in this endless cycle of comparison. And I'm
Yeah.
like, your situation right now is what it is. That's what you need to wrestle with. Like, no matter how stupid the steps may seem, like, I don't know how to, I don't know, Google something. Well, then you learn how to Google something. Like,
Right.
it doesn't matter what is in front of you. The fact is that you have to face what is in front of you. And whatever
Mhm.
those steps are, those are there for you to take, and nothing
Yeah.
else. So
Mhm.
I think it's extremely, important to main keep that focus on yourself, and
Mhm.
get hyper specific about it, because that is the path ahead, and
Mhm.
you can only change it through action. So
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, I totally think you're right. And even in like a this is something I've been thinking about a lot lately, in like to flip that context a little bit into like the sampling world. A lot of times people will, when they go into a studio, if they're recording a song or something, or if they're at home and they're referencing another song, to try and be like that sonically, rhythmically, or otherwise, the sort of like A/B comparison, it oftentimes, for me, and I think for others too, it can like dilute the original intention or thought. Like if we're in the studio referencing a dead drum from a whatever Queens of the Stone Age record or something, or even like a modern like pop song or something, like I used to bring in a lot of references. It's like, let's make something that sounds like that. And by doing that, you've already lost sort of this intrinsic cool potential that you had to make something from scratch, where it's like, let's take this drum and make it sound cool. It doesn't need to sound like St. Vincent's new record or whatever. Like, it's fine to use that for inspiration, I suppose, but if you're trying to turn this thing, this drum, for example, into something that is not this drum, that is something we're trying to replicate, I don't know. It kind of, I feel like it dilutes it. And I think that's kind of what you're getting at too, in some ways, where this comparison is of yourself to other people translates into the creative world too. Like, let's make something creatively that's like this other thing. It's like, I don't know. I think if you can lean more into your intuition, you're better off. Even if it doesn't sound as good or if it's not as cool, that's a better route to take, I believe, than to compare. Just this comparative thing all the time is never ending. And especially in business world, like, people try to give you advice or say you should do something else, or have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? Like, this guy's making $1 million a year doing it like this. Maybe you should get into NFTs and all this other shit. And you're like, you know what? I'm fucking good. Like, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do this my way. I got it figured out for the most part. Like, let me have my own autonomy, I suppose.
Yeah. And the moment you start, copying or chasing that other thing, by definition, it's not creative anymore. It's replication. You're trying
Totally.
to replicate something. So you can't be creative in that sort of a state. And I think that's where a lot of people get caught up in. May that be in creativity or business. Well, business, it can be creative as well, but sort of maybe touching on business on a broader scale. Is that something that has always been kind of innate in you to kind of have that, I guess, entrepreneurial approach to things? And well, I guess that's really the first part of this question, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that is natural to you, or did you have to learn it sort of through the process of doing it?
Yeah. In bands, like my first band, Tickle Me Pink, was like, we had a lot of managerial stuff that had to be figured out. Like, I guess I was like 19 years old when it's like, logistically, you got to figure out taxes. You got to figure out, okay, we just got all this money. Like, we got to put this here, put this there. And that kind of all fell on me, but I also wanted to do it. I was like, let me take charge of the money. Like, this is all new. You all trust me here. Like, let me take over this. And um, so from a young age, I was fascinated with a lot of stuff, like investing, even like started buying stocks around that time and stuff. Wish I'd gotten into crypto then, but I didn't. But yeah, it was just financially, stuff made sense to me, and even like managerially, like the spreadsheets I would make and like get stuff ready for tour, that was kind of always in the back of my mind. And so translating that into what I do now, I think it's like inherently there was a lot of that kind of skill inside of me, but having to learn like all this new stuff was like nothing I'd done before. And it's like the building of a website, the building of an e-commerce platform, understanding how ads work, understanding how that relates to everything else. It's all connected. Like, it's all this weird system, and every business has their own system. And so to keep that inside of my head and to learn it all was kind of like nothing I'd ever done before, and it was all on my own. And that's been the hardest part, I think, of all this, is just like maintaining all this information and still trying to learn stuff and adapt as we go on. It's just like, it's exhausting, truly exhausting.
Yeah, well, it's a never-ending process, because the market, the landscape is always changing, and you're adjusting and you're trying to
Exactly.
come up with something new. So it's really becomes like a lifestyle. You
Yeah.
can't. I mean, you can take days off, but it's like it's constantly evolving. So to stay
Yeah.
on top of that. Is there, like, business-wise thinking, what was the biggest surprise of running a business overall? Like, was there something that really struck you by surprise about, could be anything, the industry or whatever comes to mind?
The biggest surprise has been how much money I give Facebook every every year. It like, dude, it would disgust you how much money I give Facebook. And this is something I've had to grapple with myself because I I don't like Facebook as much as the next person. I understand what it is and its utility. It's just kind of not my thing. I'm on Instagram. Facebook owns Instagram. My data is there. It exists. Do I like that? No, not really. But in terms of like my business Circles wouldn't exist as a self-sustaining company without Facebook. Period. I would not get the reach. I would not get the low cost of marketing without Facebook. And so Facebook gets a lot of shit because of what they've done with our data and how kind of just skeezy they are. The thing that gets overlooked in this conversation, I think, is how little it takes for small companies, small businesses like mine, to reach the right customers at a cost that is outrageously low. And like, I was talking with somebody the other day about how this kind of feels like a slot machine. Marketing and advertising on Facebook feels like a slot machine, because when you're doing it, you are seeing all these metrics, including return on ad spend, which is the most crucial metric there is. And that's changing a little bit with new privacy changes on iOS and stuff like that. But for example, if I'm running an ad for Dead Library and that one is doing really well, and it has let's say a 4 to 5x return on ad spend, which is pretty good. That's actually on the high end of stuff. So for every $100 I'm spending, I'm getting 400 to 500 back. So I'm potentially netting, every time I spend $100, I'm getting $400. And you're seeing this and you're tracking it, and it's a slot machine. But that's what it feels like. It's not literally a slot machine because you're trading goods and all that, but you're giving Facebook money and money and money. And then now I can see this like year-end tally of how much I spent last year, how much I spent total over time. And it's outrageous. That's been the most shocking thing of owning a company, is realizing how much money it takes to advertise. And Facebook, they have a monopoly because of Facebook and Instagram, but there's also Google, there's also Twitter, there's Reddit, there's TikTok now. The return on ad spend is not as good on those platforms for what I do, but I'm hoping that it won't always be this dominating Facebook ads manager, basically determining how much money I make, basically.
Yeah.
That's the hardest thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of like, obviously social media and paid marketing has a extremely negative reputation right now. But I think that's largely a very naive and ignorant take on it on its own. Like, obviously there are many clear negatives about some of these companies and what they do and so forth, but there's so much upside, like what you talked about making giving small creators the opportunity of actually turning what they do into a living, selling what it is that they do, may that be goods or services, but they are connecting a lot of the world, and they are facilitating these tremendous paths for people who want to create something to people who genuinely want to consume that thing. So I think we would be far better off if we kind of diversified that conversation and actually started to talk about a lot of the upside. And I think that comes mainly from smaller businesses, because
Mhm.
it absolutely can change your life. But I think
Mhm.
this is probably a good point to jump into some of the marketing questions that I have. What is the balance between organic marketing versus your paid marketing? Like, I
Mhm.
get the impression that the paid is kind of the bigger thing, and obviously gives you more bang for your buck versus doing something perhaps more long-winded way and not knowing what the
Yeah.
return is. But do you still? Well, I guess you could describe the balance between the two and what you do. Well, you touched on Facebook already, so I guess the
Mhm.
organic is left to be discussed. But does
Yeah.
that have any place in what you do at this stage, or?
Yes. And I wish it had more. And it's possible that there's always more to be done in terms of reaching people organically, whether that's word of mouth or non-traditional ways of advertising, like trade shows, or doing something, having a shtick on TikTok or something that is an angle that is organic versus paid. Um, it's hard to track organic reach. The best metric I would have for that would be like in like Google Analytics, you can kind of see, how many people just like, Googled you and reached you organically. That's not a one-to-one correlation with being truly organic, because we're advertising, the most we spend is, like I said, Facebook and Instagram. So that's typically on mobile. People will discover us on mobile. You're not buying a sample library on your mobile app, on your iPhone or Android, whatever. You are buying it on your computer. So somebody has their phone, they see an ad, they go, oh, that's cool. Probably ignore it. See it again, like, oh, shit, maybe I should check that out. Click on the website on their phone, then realize you have to download it, drop it, forget about it, come back later on their computer, download it there. So that's not organic, but it comes up as organic on Google because they're just searching it, and then they click on it and then they discover you. So it's technically not organic. And I would say that word of mouth, definitely, I'm hearing about that people are talking about it, or that, this guy heard it from his friend and he got it. Like even on Instagram posts or Facebook posts, people will be like, remember when I was telling you about this the other day? They'll tag one of their friends and shit. So it definitely happens, and I think it's exponential. There's probably like there's I don't even know what percentage I could put at it, but maybe like a 1 to 5% organic, I would say. Very low. That's my best guess. Most of it is paid, unfortunately. But there is, in terms of marketing, like, the email list that we have is fucking massive now. And that's another expense, which is weird. Like MailChimp and Omnisend, they're like, that's like $300 a month for the tier of subscribers we're at. Even if you don't send any emails, it's like $300 a month, which is like, maybe I should have gotten into that business if I can charge people that. So that's insane. But I guess that would be considered organic, is having like a large mailing list, which we do. That's really helpful too, but it's mostly paid.
Yeah. And obviously, over time, as you do spend this money on the paid, some of
Mm-hmm.
those people convert into like long time organic customers.
Yes.
So you're kind of transferring them sort of slowly into that area.
Okay.
So it's not as clear cut, obviously. Um,
Mhm.
so you've branded circles really well, in my estimation.
Thank you.
Is that have you always had like an understanding and an eye for branding and the kind of the visual side of things that relate to that? Is it something you always sort of had an intuition for, or have you actually educated yourself sort of more
Mhm.
practically in terms of how to
Yeah.
improve that?
Well, I've definitely gotten better, and I was not very good at first. Terrible. I was really bad at first with graphic design specifically. and you get better. Like I just looked the other day at I just got a new MacBook, so I was transferring over a bunch of shit and just like looking through old stuff.
Did,
And I found this.
no, sorry.
What
Did
is that?
you get the new souped up
I did.
M1,
I
the
did. I got the
Pro?
steroided out MacBook Pro, just
Okay.
totally maxed.
Let me
I
know how
love it.
that turns
It's
out.
amazing.
Okay. Well,
It's
fuck.
amazing.
I have this old dying iMac that I'm trying to survive with, and I pray to the
Okay.
gods that it doesn't die anytime soon because I can't afford
Mhm.
to replace it right now. But yeah.
Yeah, I wrecked credit card. I wrecked my Apple card on this new one. What I'm waiting for is what I really wanted rather was the iMac, the new like M2 or whatever they're gonna call it, iMac. So we'll see if that comes soon.
Yeah.
The fuck was I talking about before that?
Uh, we're talking about branding. You were going through
Branding.
some old files or something.
Yes. Yes, I was going through yeah, these old design files of like, oh God, it was like website prototypes and like early circle stuff. And it was so fucking bad. It was like, it was just bad. It was like almost like first year, like Microsoft Paint level bad. And so, no, I was not, I definitely had an eye for what I liked, but I didn't know what was good, I guess. And I still stumble through that. Like even lately I've been working on designs in Photoshop, which is primarily what I use to like just flesh stuff out. And I still struggle a lot with getting things to feel right. And a lot of times I will go through revision after revision after revision and it's still not right. Um and I do I think everything on circles is my designs. Some of the photos aren't, but everything else is basically just me learning. But really, that just comes from doing a bunch of different things, most of them really bad, and then being able to look at them all together and go, this one's the least bad. How can I make this better? And then revising that one and kind of going from there. But design is probably the hardest creative part of this because it's what I'm the least good at, I would say. But
Yeah.
I try to be very open about what is good and what is bad design wise.
So you mentioned you're working with some people over in Germany or something. Is that something? Is it related to a new project, or are you gonna
Yeah.
change how you do your marketing and the visual stuff, or what's
No,
kind of my
marketing is unchanged. This is for uh, kind of a longer term vision for circles is getting into software, um, specifically like from the ground up software. So not like a contact library, not building on top of another platform, but having our own sampler software. This is something I've been working on for years now, and this is something we've been working with this company in Berlin to help us do the UI UX stuff, and this coder in Stockholm who's helping us do the coding for it. And this is an area that I'm really interested in pivoting to as a company. But it has been so hard to find people to do this. Um, I I talked with probably a dozen developers, software developers, um, over the past 2 years, and none of them, except for the ones that we've currently found recently, have been like either available or understand the type of work we're trying to do or I'm wanting to do. So that's been a big journey. But the people we've been working with in Berlin and Stockholm are specifically for a software project that we're in the middle of working on right now.
yeah? That sounds kind of interesting. That it's difficult to find the people. I guess when you go to a kind of high enough level, and also the specificity of what you're trying to achieve, as that
Mm-hmm.
becomes more accurate, obviously again like finding the right people to do the editing for you, again that's like
Yeah.
specificity what you're looking for. So I guess uh, in that sense it isn't like a surprise, but
Right.
you know I'd expect there to be people for that? Is the problem like that they can't see the vision and understand the big picture, or what is the challenge about finding the right person for that? Is it the technical ability, or is it something else?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it's a combination of a few of those things. Like the well, first of all, there's not a lot of money in music app development in general. So I think a lot of these really good coders and developers will flock to like a Google or Facebook or or a startup with a high valuation or something, because they're probably going to make a lot of money doing that. So in this industry, there's less money and there's less people doing this kind of development. And interestingly, everybody I've talked to that I felt like was worth engaging in this conversation with is not in America, is not in the U.S. They're dotted kind of all over Europe, and so I think culturally that speaks to a lot of what's happening here. Where I think this is my guess. I don't know, but it seems like creatively, musically, and in combining that with a development sort of mindset, there's a lot more people in Europe, specifically like Berlin, Stockholm. Like I mentioned, I talked to one guy in the UK. I've talked to another one in UK, and I don't know. It doesn't seem to add up quite right why there aren't a lot of people. But I think it is financially the rewards aren't so much there. It is a marriage of marrying music with coding is not always the like a I don't know what the word is, not a good fit. It's hard. It seems there's a lot of friction there. It's hard to bring those two together. It's really easy to, I shouldn't say really easy, but it's much easier to design something. Like we can design this plugin, this software very easily. This is how it should work. That's the fucking easy part. The hard part is having somebody build that for you and make it work, not have it be DSP intensive. And all this other stuff that comes about in that world is really hard, and it's very interdisciplinary in nature. So I've found that is the absolute most difficult part of this, is just finding somebody that understands what it is that you're trying to do and is willing to do it at a fair price.
Yeah.
Maybe that's just recruiting people in general, which is something I'm learning lately, but development it seems very hard.
Yeah. Do you have any, without disclosing anything that you don't want to share,
Yeah.
do you have any tips on how to find these people, like these collaborators? Like, do you go on LinkedIn, or do you go on these different forums or websites and then search for them? Like, do you have any tips on how to find the people that you want to work with?
I did a lot of that sort of digging on LinkedIn, on forums. There was a native instrument forum that I came across that I reached out to some like mods there that had their shit together. And I would not go down the route of like some of these websites that will link you to developers. Like I think it's like Top Tall is one of them, and there's other ones like them that like you basically pay a subscription to be hooked up to these developers that'll build something for you. I think you can just ignore all those. I think the best route to go is find the company's software that you like and just contact them and go through if there's credits, or if you can just email them, or find them on you can find a lot of really good designers on like Dribbble and Behance, and find stuff that looks cool, find people that have actually built things, and just reach out to them, and they'll probably have a price. And if they can't do it, they'll tell you, but if they can, they'll usually engage in a conversation. So it's kind of just find that shit you like and ping them, see if they get back to you.
Yeah. No, I think that's extremely solid advice. Touching on sort of looping back to partners that you work with, or business partners, trying to loop this back to Tyler Lindgren. Other than that sort of technical capability and skill? Like, what is it that you look for in your, certainly in your business partners, but they could be sort of more, people you hire for specific tasks? Like, are there any kind of personality traits or anything else that you look for in partners? And why did you end up working with Tyler, for example?
Yeah, Tyler's been my homie since we were basically like kids, more or less. We were in math class together in high school and played in marching band together, so we've known each other. And then he went to LA, went to recording school down in Phoenix, and then went to LA, and he worked on The Voice and did a bunch of other really cool stuff, session work with a lot of prominent engineers. I worked with a mastering engineer out there. Basically, he got like the LA tour of like all the stuff, all the knowledge. He's been to a lot of the really cool studios there. So this guy he's filled with knowledge. He's like one of the smartest people I know, and very much engineer minded, and which I am not. I'm not engineer minded at all, but he very much is. So we reconnected when I was out in LA and he was out there. And so we go to this brewery called Golden Road, which is like kind of this like trashy, not really a good brewery, but we used to go for hikes in Runyon and then just go to this brewery and get trashed together and smoke cigarettes and talk shit. And it was like, oh my God, we're like the same people, but just, we left for a little while and we came back together, and this is great. And then, that's right around the time I was starting Circles, talking to him about that. And it just made sense to do stuff together. And he has not only a ton of knowledge and is a true real engineer, but he has a ton of really good gear too. So I benefit. And so the first library we did together was Garage, and that was great. It's the easiest recording ever. We did Dead 1975 together, and we did the desert stuff and outdoor stuff, and he'll come and hang out while we do any other recordings at like the blasting room with Andrew Berlin, who's another collaborator, who's he works at the blasting room full time, but he's just an incredible mixer, engineer, and a great hang. So to sum it up, it's usually just about the hang, like who's fun to hang out with for 6 hours. I don't really need the best of anything, but I found two people that are really fucking good at what they do and they're a good hang. So I've lucked out. I'm probably the most annoying one of the group and the least knowledgeable. So it's great. I don't know. It's just finding people you can have fun with, I guess, or just, relax with is
Yeah.
nice.
Do you have any tips on how to be a better partner for them? Because obviously the question is often focused on how can I find the right people and get the
Yeah,
right things. So is there something you've realized that you can, do or be for them to make it better?
that's a great question. um, yeah. I would say openness, like pretty radical openness and honesty about whatever it is you're doing. And it's like, especially if there's money involved and stuff like that, I always want to be sure that everybody feels valuable in one way or another. Like, am I paying you enough, or is this, is it, that kind of stuff is really touchy. So that needs to be, I think, openness and honesty is something that's important for somebody in my position to do. And yeah, really, I think that kind of mentality is the best thing to have. Like, not just about the money stuff, but just openness. Like, what do you think? What is the consensus here? Are you enjoying this? Do you want to do this? Is there something you want to do? Just kind of being open and listening. I don't want to be a boss. I really don't, but it's kind of the role I've found myself in. It's like I'm the instigator. I own this company. It's weird to say, but I do, and I run it, and it supports me and my family. So I kind of gotta be serious about stuff, and that just necessitates me being like the guy in charge sometimes. So it's a good question. I should ask
Yeah.
Tyler, how can I be a better partner?
Yeah, no, I think it's a very solid answer, and you know, I'm sure, um, you know, honesty can be, the truth can be painful, but it's,
Yeah.
it's useful, and it's, if something isn't grounded in truth, then it's not really grounded in anything in terms of the
Mhm.
long term. So yeah, I think that's a pretty solid um, answer. Let's talk a bit about physical location. Um, what I really like about what you're doing is, obviously it's a very internet based thing, and you can be running this basically from anywhere where you have
Yeah.
decent internet connection. So you're now in Colorado, and I saw a few like Instagram pics where you were like on the road for some
Mhm.
time period. Was that like an extended time period, or was it like just a
Yeah.
summer trip or something?
No, my wife and I were on the road for like 8 months, between like mid 2019 and 2020. It's when we left Pittsburgh and we're staying at my family's ranch in Wyoming, and my family's ranch, former ranch, they've sold it down in like northeast Scottsdale, Arizona. So it's two of the most like beautiful locations that we could just go and hang out at. And so we didn't have a house. We have two dogs, and we just packed our car full of shit and just kind of hung out there for a while. And I worked from my laptop. There was Wi-Fi at both locations, and it was totally fine. In fact, when we went down to Arizona the first time, that's when I did the whole first dead thing, which is like on my laptop, the bass guitar riff from that library is just like me straight DI into my laptop, just like in my father-in-law's like office. Just it was, I don't know. It's kind of awesome that you don't need to be anywhere. All you need is a computer. But we definitely value just being autonomous and getting up and going places and feeling free. And part of that I think is like a very like American thing. Like one great thing about America is just that you can just get up and go drive somewhere and just feels like you can drive for forever. And so something about growing up in the West too, in Colorado, you always kind of have that, like whether you're touring in bands or just trying to get away, you always have this vast openness you can just escape to, and then you're in the middle of nothing. And yeah, it's something I think I value, and me and my wife both value. But I love being able to just piece the fuck out sometimes.
Yeah. I didn't actually even ask a question, and you answered the question that I had. So that's that's perfect. I actually do wanna. I have a section here that's dedicated for dogs because
Okay.
I love dogs, and I'm a dog person. So, um, I saw the at least two German shepherds there.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I assume you're a dog person, and
Very much
wondered
so.
if you could maybe like briefly amuse me and kind of talk about maybe the impact that animals overall have to your, maybe even not workflow, but your life, and does that help you with creativity or maintaining perspective on what it is that you do, or maybe like have you learned anything from your dogs? Maybe that's a silly question, but
No, I love it. I love it. Yeah, I have two German shepherds. The older one, he's now what is he? He's 11 years old. So he's got a big gray beard. He's kind of like an old wolf soul. And then we got this smaller German Shepherd. His name's Animal, and he's crazy. He's just like he's weird. He's almost like he can. Did you ever see the movie Coco? That Disney Pixar movie?
I don't think so.
There's there's it's a great movie. You should check it out. It's probably my favorite, definitely my favorite Pixar movie. And there's this dog in it. His name's Dante, and he's like this escort between like the human world and the spirit world. And he's got like one ear that doesn't go up and one ear that goes up, and like his tongue hangs out. And my dog Animal looks exactly like Dante. So he's just he's got this weird vibe. We got him in the desert too, and he was he probably helps me like take breaks. Like he'll kind of come down and remind me and be like, bro, what the fuck you doing? Like, this isn't important. Like, let's go outside. So he's definitely helped me a lot. I think dogs in general are just like, I don't know, they have such a presence about them, and we've always we've always loved German shepherds too, for whatever reason. They just feel like this weird emotional, they're just like really emo wolves is what they feel like. Like they just have this vibe about them that I love. I imagine us having like a flock of like 15 German shepherds and like a big farm at some point. That's kind of like my dream come true.
Sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's their ability to be present in the moment. That's something that I don't unfortunately have a dog yet. We did have one when I was little, but yeah, I definitely want to have one day again, and I think they help us reconnect with just what you said, kind of the basics and the fundamentals of life and being present in the moment. I guess I could use this kind of as a somewhat decent segue into kind of the topic of life balance as it relates to creativity, because you're not only doing one thing, which is like a creative field, which is certainly enough to be difficult and challenging to manage in relation to maybe the rest of your life, but you're also in business, which is another thing that is massively difficult to um, handle, and you're kind of enmeshed in both of those fields. So first of all, do you feel like your life balance in terms of like your relationships and other stuff in your life and how that relates to creativity and business, do you feel like they have a strong connection? Like if one is struggling, does the other struggle, or can you sort of compartmentalize those and work on them individually? And maybe what kind of a bearing does your sort of normal life, I guess, all the
Yeah.
stuff, does that have a bearing on your creativity and business side, and how do you manage the two?
Yeah, totally. It's all, for me, it's all connected. If there's something, I don't feel like I can have any like real major stressors if I need to be like, if I need to be like creative, or if I need to record something, or really just any kind of work. If I have like a lingering stressor from real life, whatever you want to call it, from the other life, they do feel distinct and separate. Like even like being in my little studio room here, like I enter into a different space completely, but I still carry in everything that I came in with today. And so very much I'm not the kind of person, I can compartmentalize. I don't like to, and it is hard to be creative, or just to do work in general if I'm bringing in any type of stress from my world. So I try to not have as much of that as possible. And sometimes it's not possible with life, and then some days I elect not to do any work at all because of it. Like I feel I'm lucky that I'm beholden to nobody anymore. I don't work for anybody. I work for myself, which can sometimes be a curse, but most of the time, 95% of the time, it's fucking awesome, because I can just be like, you know what, I'm not doing anything today, and I'm not going to feel bad about that, and I'm not going to feel like I owe anybody anything. So, but yeah, outside stress, it really fucks me up. Honestly, I can't, I can't be good at anything if I'm holding on to something from the outside world, the non-creative weirdo circles world.
Yeah, I'm the same way these days. I think when I was younger, I could and would channel like all the shit into the music that I do and that stuff. But
Mm.
these days, it's like I don't know, like I really need to have my personal shit in order with the people who mean the most to me, because
Yeah.
it weighs on me so heavily. So
Me too.
yeah, but do you like do you put conscious effort into prioritizing that as soon as something comes up, or like how do you
Um,
deal with it?
like, what do you mean?
Like, do you actually, because you have this company, it gives you at least certain type of, financial and maybe time freedom in certain cases. Like, do you
Mhm.
well, I guess the question is, what kind of practical choices and efforts do you do to make sure that things stay in the proper order when it comes to your immediate
Yeah.
relationships? It doesn't have to be highly specific. I guess you kind of
Yeah,
partially already answered that, but
definitely something that I've been doing lately is like every day. It's so basic, but every day I exercise for 30 minutes. I get on my elliptical and I sweat. And once I am dripping sweat, then I know it's time to get off. And I've done that for probably like the past 8 months or so. And it has made in a crazy change in just how I function in this world. So again, it's so like boring to say, but exercise fucking really works.
no, I think that's a great answer, and I think that's what a lot of creatives are lacking,
Yeah,
especially like when you're a creative, your mind is racing like crazy most of the time,
yeah,
and the way to kind of calm that down is to physically exhaust yourself.
yeah.
Like I've talked about this in previous kind of podcast episodes, and it's like a drug. Like it's like being on
It
some kind
is.
of opiates or something.
I
Um,
totally agree. Yeah, it's like I do this thing to myself every morning now where I get really caffeinated to the point where I'm like, I'm gonna have a fucking panic attack, and then I start working out. It's basically like a pre-workout. Like I do that so it forces my hand into like getting that all out. And it feels like every morning I have this like ritual purge of all the shitty feeling, and then I get off and I feel great, and it really works. And I couldn't agree more that it's like however you put it, just it's really important to clear whatever is happening in your head or reignite it too. It's like maybe it's not clearing, maybe you're like starting the fire of some idea you had again. And yeah, I would say exercise is like has been really important to me.
yeah, cool. Um, let's talk about drummers for a short moment. When I look at you play, I see a lot of kind of like Taylor Hawkins energy
Yeah,
in what you do. Is that
yeah,
like a correct observation? And
that's
and
correct. I have a Taylor Hawkins tattoo right here
oh,
and a
there you
John
go.
Bonham tattoo
Cool.
from I got these when I was very young. Would I get it again? I don't know if I would.
Well, it's there now. So
There now, it ain't going anywhere.
yeah. Do you have well, first of all, I guess like what about his playing speaks to you, and if you have any other favorite drummers, who are they and why?
I mean, Dave Grohl definitely is probably my favorite. I mean, I grew up listening to all those bands: Foo Fighters, Nirvana, Queens of Stone Age, then Crooked Vultures. Um, Bonham obviously was one of my first big influences, and those are more or less like the classic, drummer, John Bonham, Dave Grohl. Two of my favorites. I used to go to these drum clinics too all the time in Colorado because we had this local drum shop here called Colorado Drum that would bring in these really amazing drummers like Dennis Chambers or Steve Gadd or God, there's this guy named Zorro that was a really good drummer, like the first drum clinic I went to. And so I was exposed to a lot of that stuff. And that's kind of when the internet just like had just come out, not just come out, but like, everybody had the internet more or less. And I'd go to like drummerworld.com and look at all these incredible, just like ripping drummers. And so definitely got a lot of inspiration from a variety of sources, but the biggest were always Grohl, Bonham, And then later would be like a Josh Freese. I think he's an incredible drummer. And who else? I mean, those are kind of the biggest ones. And then Taylor Hawkins, of course, just because I loved the Foo Fighters and still do, but they were a huge influence on me growing up. Yeah, those are my faves.
Cool. Um, Kind of linking that to what you're doing with circles, like obviously your skill and style as a drummer bleeds into your sample libraries because you're the one who's playing them. So,
Right.
when I'm playing your samples here in my studio, I'm not
Mhm.
I'm not just playing them. I'm also playing you playing the
Yeah.
samples, which
Right.
is like a very important part of sample libraries. It's not only a recording of the snare or the kick, it's you
Mhm.
playing it in a certain way. So do you have sort of any governing like philosophies relating to that, like about your, like how does that influence your style when you're doing the
Yeah.
libraries, and do you sort of develop your drumming with that in mind in some sort
Mhm.
of a way?
Yeah, I've thought about that a lot too, especially as like you kind of as the business grows and more people download it, you start to it gets kind of trippy. Like you just said, like you're playing me playing the sample. It's like well, that's weird. Like so uh I do think there's room for, and not to sound like woo woo bullshit, but like there is room for like intention in recording these samples and recording these loops, especially where it's like, am I here? Am I just doing this to do this? Are we just sampling for the sake of sampling, or do I actually give a fuck here? Is this like, am I into this? Am I accenting the hi hat because it makes me feel good, or just little things like that that are sometimes lost in the recording process that I think are important to remember when you're in there. Like, hey, somebody's making a song with this. Somebody's like spending time. Somebody, first of all, they paid you for this. Now they're taking your loop or your sample and they're using it. Like, one would hope that if you take that process all the way back to when it was actually sampled, that the guy or girl sampling it was like actually present and gave a fuck about it to begin with. So there is that ethos there too. And another thing that I've discovered through this whole process and like understanding how other people do stuff in sampling world is like they will 9 times out of 10, if you get like a studio library from East West or Ocean Way or any of these big sample libraries, they're usually getting like an intern to come in there and hit the drums because it's a very tedious, monotonous task. Like you're not getting Dave Grohl or Josh Freese or Taylor Hawkins to come in there and sample a ride cymbal for 2.5 hours because that's how long it takes to deep sample a ride cymbal. Trust me, I've done it. And they're not doing that. So what you're getting most of the time, this isn't all the time, but a lot of the times you're getting a intern tracking a ride cymbal because that's easy for them to do. You're not getting a drummer do it. So the way they hit it, the way they hit the hi-hat, the way they hit the snare, the way they hit everything is not the same. It's so different. And even when we sample stuff, I'm I'm the guy that goes in there and does it. And we've had other people do it before. Other people that are drummers and non-drummers do it, and it's different. It's not better or worse, but it's different. And sometimes the dynamics fluctuate too much, and there's just a lot of room for fuckery. And so, unfortunately, that is one thing that I think I'll be stuck doing for basically ever, is being like the guy that hits the drums. But going back to your question, I do think it is very important that there is um, an intention and a skill behind the person that is actually hitting the drums, because that's what you're paying for. So I would hope that the person that the sound source, the actual source that it came from, was present and gave a shit.
Yeah, yeah, and I think obviously based on the success of your libraries, it's like people are paying for your playing as well, like your feel, your touch. Like to me,
Yeah.
it seems absurd to be sending an intern into a into a recording room
I
to
agree.
play these things. Like it seems like, because you're only quotes only hitting the stick on a snare at a certain level, but obviously
Yeah.
that's like a drastic oversimplification of, well, so many things, but technique
Right.
and everything. Like, it's the touch
Yeah.
matters, and obviously uh, it must. I haven't done any kind of sampling sessions where I was playing something. Well, that's not true. I've sampled this piano here so,
Okay.
a few years
Yeah.
ago when I had to
Huh?
for a university task. But um, is that, like, obviously as you're playing, how do you channel that right mindset into the recording session? Because if you're playing something extremely quietly or loud, it can be lacking context. Obviously, the
Yeah.
context, because there's no song. So how do you? Is there something like practical or mental that you do to, I guess, adjust your perspective and approach to bringing consistency and bringing some kind of, I guess, sonic sense into what you're
Mhm.
doing?
I think it's more practical than anything, where you kind of like, for me, we did this library called Low recently that's like, it's really it's vibier, I guess. I don't know what the better word descriptor is for it, but it's more loose, it's more like open and vibey. It's not rocky. It's like, it's kind of ethereal sounding or something. And it I was, a lot of what that was practically like, I was like, hey Tyler, like, let's nuke the rooms and give me that mix, make sure that's like really loud in here. And so I'm playing off of it. Tyler's in the other room, like turning forget which pedal we went through for some of the effects, but he's basically jamming with me with like it was either a delay or a phaser or some pedal combination of pedals. And so we're jamming together and we're feeling it. We're at a tempo, and it really translates in the mix, because I'm basically having fun. I'm in there like thinking like, oh, this is cool. This would be dope as fuck. And it's usually not to a click track. It's usually just kind of whatever the vibe is. So practically, I think in loops, it makes sense to have a good mix in your headphones that sounds good to you. And but in loops, the last thing I'll mention is, a lot of time I will cut in editing a lot of loops, because a lot of them are just trash, and you can hear it. Like, you can just tell, like, this is like nonsense. Like, you're not saying anything, you're not getting anything across. It doesn't feel good. So I'll just delete those. But in samples are different, because it's so not musical in a lot of ways. It's like anti-musical. You're like you're like hitting the drum, hitting it. Okay, next velocity layer. For this software project I was telling you about, it's very deep sampled, and I made this chart, and it was all the velocity layers I needed to get for all the drums, and it was on a 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, and I'm just dragging my finger across. Like, here's the next velocity. I just, in Photoshop, I made these little boxes. Here's the next one. Okay, drag up to the next one, just so I knew like where I was in context of everything. And we sampled so many drums, but just for snare drums, we sampled 26 snare drums with 10 velocity layers, 8 round robins. So that's 80 hits per drum times 26, and you got to wait for it to decay out and stuff like that. So it's profoundly anti-musical, right? Because you're not vibing in that moment. But the best thing I've found you could do is just you know kind of take a deep breath and be like, okay, I'm gonna make this snare hit the best snare hit I possibly can, over and over and over again. And there's no vibe there. It's just kind of about like, I'm just doing my job as best I can right now, and hopefully this will translate later.
Yeah, cool. We're gonna move into the final questions here so that you can get on with your day at some point. But
Sounds good.
um, what do you think, like, looking back on your journey so far, what is the thing that you've done best so far in your own estimation? Could be anything about like the business side of things, could be mental, stuff for yourself, anything really that comes to mind. What is the thing that you've you've done really well in your estimation?
These are great questions, by the way. You're like a excellent podcast host.
Well, I try. I mean, I'm in the very early stages of doing this, but
I think you're killing it. You've got this great like broadcast voice too. The mic is very helpful, but your voice itself is very low and soothing. It's
thanks,
nice.
man. I try and utilize. I have done a lot of singing, and I think a lot of that. I didn't ever really enjoy singing lessons a lot. I really struggle to like connect my mind with what my body is doing. So I feel very like in the very early stages, even still after years of singing, I feel like I haven't even figured out who I am as a singer, but I try and relax and just speak sort of down low, I guess. But I appreciate the kind words.
Ways. I don't ever talk like I'm out of breath having this conversation because I don't ever talk this much.
Well, I'm sorry for forcing you to do that, but
no, it's okay. We started doing a lot more podcasts ourselves, and we'll probably put them out over the next few days. And we actually touched on a few topics that we talked about today, so I'm helpfully prepared for that. But it is interesting. I did this like hour-long solo podcast basically about how I started circles and all that, and we did a Q&A thing, which I think is why we started to talk again. But it's fascinating to remember to breathe when I talk, and it is such an art. And I think about like these podcasts that are 3 hours, which is like kind of, I guess, not the standard, but it seems like you were saying like a good length. But it is shocking how rare it is to talk for 3 hours straight today. And I don't know if it's always been like that, but it is fascinating that like my voice is like almost hoarse from just like engaging in a pretty standard conversation. And that's a muscle I don't use very much. So it's fascinating to go through this.
Yeah, it certainly takes a lot of time to get used to. And, I've never, like growing up, I wasn't a good speaker at all. Like this is whatever I have today is just a direct result of putting a camera there and forcing myself to make these episodes. Like, this is a direct result of just practical work. No talent in speaking whatsoever. Like, I've really struggled to connect my thoughts into this box here that is producing these words. But
I think you're fucking killing it. I struggle so hard with that too. And one thing that actually helped me is doing podcasts and re-listening to myself talk. And go, oh, that is a terrible like tick that you have. Or the way you say like or make these noises, and I'm like, why are you doing that? Or also I do this thing, and I'm sure I've done it in this podcast, where I start this thought and then don't finish it and then don't know what to do. And it's sort of like it is this disconnect where I know where my brain just went or where it's going, but I don't know how to articulate that in a way that you'll understand. And it just sort of just like stops. Then I go, oops, I need to fix that. But it's tricky. It's harder than people think.
It's very tricky to like to construct what you say in a sensible way that is easy to follow. Like it's not easy at all. And everybody sucks at that. And you only get better at it by doing it.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's difficult. But you've been amazing today, and your voice is in fact quite good. So don't worry about that at all.
Thank you.
And most importantly, I think you're a great storyteller, and just it's a pleasure to hear you share your stories and journey, and it's very followable. No, I can't even pronounce that word. I can follow what you're saying very clearly.
Well, that's good. That's good. It's good to hear.
Cool. Do you have an answer to the thing that you've done?
To the actual question?
Yeah.
The thing I'm most proud of. That was a question?
Could be that. Yeah. I mean, that's a different way of phrasing it, but yeah, like the question was, what have you done really well in your own estimation? If I were to force you to look yourself in the mirror and say, you've done this thing really well, is there anything that comes to mind?
Yeah, it's funny, that question makes me like weirdly uncomfortable. I would rather talk about the things that I don't do well than the things I do well. I think I do well. Um, which is interesting. I would say this creatively anyways. This is just what the first thing that came up when you said this was, we just did this new library, Dead 1975, and I I toil away on creative um, aspects of it. Usually visual creative aspects of it are the ultimate. How should I put this? Like, you can do a sample library, it can be amazing, but if you can't tell a story or visually represent that in some way, then it doesn't matter, because people, that's how people are going to relate to it. It has to have a very strong visual component as well as audio. They're tied together, especially in the way that we do marketing, like we touched on earlier. But the Dead 1975 video that I made for it, I initially had made this short video with a different song, and it was okay. It was, it was good enough. It was passable. But when I showed it to people, they were like, "Oh, cool, man. That's awesome." It wasn't like an "oh fuck yeah" moment. And I was like, God damn it, I knew it sucked. I knew this sucked. So I started over, started from scratch, and wrote this very, like, heavy kind of rock, very Queens of Stone Agey kind of thing. And then I made this video for it. I grabbed this red LED light that I have and illuminated my kick drum, and I illuminated myself with this big blue light. I had this ripping song, and just kind of pieced everything together, and it felt so good, and it felt so right. And it was, I think, my favorite video thing I've done maybe ever. And my goal is to always basically like take people on like a very short roller coaster. Like, here's the introduction, here's the part that blows you away, and then here's like the resolution of it all. So it should feel like a very succinct 30 to 45-second roller coaster is my thinking when it comes to these ads or whatever. And I felt like for that one, I'd finally connected the music, the visuals, and the length of time, and articulated that in a way that made sense. And that was like one of my proudest moments. And then when I put it out, you never know what's going to happen when you put these things out. When I put it out, it was very well received as well, and continues to perform well on ads and stuff. And so that was like everything connected, the creative, the visual, and then also the success of the library. So it's those moments that like I'm always searching for, trying to get to, and I feel like I got there with that one. So as of late, that would be something I'm most happy about, that I've done personally, most proud of.
Yeah, I think for good reason, because it is a stunning video, and like that's why I think your branding is well, I mean, overall very well done, but like that's, I think, like a pinnacle of what you've done so far, and it is beautifully everything about it, like the color grading, the balance of it all, the sound of it all. I think it is very justified to feel the way you do. So I suggest people check it out, and obviously buy the library, because it sounds brilliant.
Buy it up.
Yeah. What would you say was the best mistake you've done so far? And what I usually mean by that question is like something that maybe was a fuck up or a mistake at first, but then it down the road led to something positive, like maybe a realization, or realized that the fork in the road was actually maybe better at the end of the day. Is that a difficult question?
It is hard. It's good. I was just thinking, the first desert library we did was one of those things where I was so sure people were going to love it, and they were going to be like, this is so radical and weird and different. And they didn't. And in fact, like, I had one of my friends come down and film this like fucking dope looking. It almost looked like a Mission Impossible trailer in the desert. My friend Ben is this amazing videographer, camera guy, and he flew out there and shot the footage, and it just looks like, incredible. And there was this whole sort of narration I did that I think I could have done a little less. It was a little like kind of woo woo maybe, like I just wanted to vibe off the land kind of thing. Like looking back, like, okay, so what I was gonna say is we put this beautiful video together, and he put it together, and we put it out, and the first comment on YouTube was, "This is the dumbest fucking thing I have ever seen." And then there was another one later, like, "Is this guy for real?" Question mark. And I was like, "Oh fuck, I went to Vibe Town with this, didn't I?" And then you start to peel back the layers, and you're like, did we really just spend all this time and money to like record drums in a desert, and like that was the thing we were doing? And like, yeah, we're just vibing, man. We're just like getting these echoes, and we're talking about the echoes off the land. And so the thing is, they're so fun to do, and I bring all my homies down to do it, and we just get hammered on mezcal at like 11 a.m. and play drums, and it's the best fucking thing ever. But I can see how they come across as potentially douchey, and that's a lesson in and of itself. It's like, we're having fun, but if you try to like relate this fun in this way, it's not going to come across. And don't try to make this into something that it's not. That's been one of the funniest little like lessons I've learned.
Yeah. Well, I think, well, that's a hell of a story as well. Like I mean, when I saw that, when I saw the sample library, I thought like, okay, that's definitely more interesting.
Yeah,
I don't think I saw the video you're talking about. I never thought that it was like dumb. I just thought it was
that's good.
interesting, and something that you probably, I did get like a feel that you were doing it on like just having fun with your friends, and kind
Yeah.
of like that it was just like a test more than anything. But I haven't seen the content you talk about.
I
But
think I adjusted the creative a little bit to like lessen the woo woo aspect of it. So the things that you probably saw or anybody else saw were dialed back a little bit. So there's
okay,
that.
cool. No, but it's definitely a fun concept, because it's kind of like taking the concept of sampling drums or any instruments in a space to kind of like times 100. Because
Yeah.
especially in because I often think about the sound of the outside, which is obviously like depends on what's around you. Like I'd want to sample a drum kit in the forest, because there's so much diffusion going on, and
Right.
it is very kind of dead in
Mhm.
many ways, if you can remove all the fauna and the flora
Right.
to make it
Denoise it.
yeah. But yeah, it is an interesting concept for sure. Second to last question. Looking back on your journey throughout your band stuff and circles,
Mhm.
is there, if you could have received like a piece of advice or a specific piece of like help from someone
Yeah.
at a stage, what do you wish that were, and when would you want to have, when would you like to have had received that help? And I usually ask this from a perspective of, because a lot of people have creative people in their life, but they're not necessarily creatives themselves, and they might not understand a lot of the stuff that's going on. So, but they want to help. They want to be, useful and helpful
Right.
to those people. So, is there something from that perspective that comes to mind? Like what?
Mhm. Yeah. That I sometimes think about that in the context of, if me now could go back to my 19-year-old self and just sit down and have a conversation, and I think it would be something to the effect of like, you should have a little more fun, be a little looser in general, because this is all so ridiculous. Like, I when I was younger, especially when thinking about this band stuff, like, my God, I was so serious, like so painfully serious. And I think that ruined a lot of the potential experiences that I could have. I mean, I still have a lot of great experiences, but like I would say to have more fun, to have not even like to actively have more fun. It's like kind of a weird way to put it, but more just like, hey, bro, like this shit is so stupid. This doesn't matter. You're on tour with your best friends. This isn't going to last. Like, go have fun. If the show sucks, whatever. Go walk around. You're in Boston tonight. Go walk over to the Harvard. Just have fun. Have more fun. I was so fucking serious. So I would say to loosen up a little bit. And yeah, that'd be my biggest advice.
Cool.
Or I guess advice that I wished I would have received from a trusted source. So I would say my 34-year-old self is my most trusted source.
Yeah, for sure. I think it should be that way, but yeah, unfortunately, not everybody views it that way, because it's like
True.
you've come to this point where you know that you are the person that you can trust the most. And I think a lot of,
Yeah.
maybe I don't want to put words in your mouth, but maybe that's accurate. But unfortunately, for a lot of people, period, let alone creatives, they think the authority for their life is somewhere else. It's always an external
Yeah.
thing that, or person who knows better than you, where I think it's maybe a better investment to try and build that within yourself
Yeah.
instead of looking for it from the
I
outside.
agree. I think a lot of it's like when people give you advice and you're not ready to hear it, that old saying, like somebody older than you gives you advice on what you should do. The reason I think it doesn't resonate is because it's like, I don't know, advice in general to anybody is just so strange. I'm like allergic to advice at this point, where if somebody has a good point, I'll feel it. It's like they'll say something or relate it in a way in their own sort of context or journey. I'll feel it. But if I'm explicitly given advice, like, hey, just to give you some advice, this 9 times out of 10, I either already know it or what they're going to say is more about them than it is about me. So I'm a bit allergic to advice, and part of that I think is like something I need to work on myself, because I'm so like anti any influence at this point. Like I from being in my 20s and feeling so burned on bands and trying so hard with other people musically, like I feel like I have a little PTSD from that, where it's like I don't want any input from anybody, period, perhaps to a fault. So that's probably something I need to work on myself, but thought I'd say it.
Yeah. Well, it's a process, like, and I fully agree. That's what I mentioned before, that like the path in front of you is your path, and it's like, even someone can sort of cast not pearls in front of swines, but like, even if someone is giving you brilliant advice, if you don't have an access point to that advice, if you can't see it clearly what they mean because of your
Yeah.
current positioning, then it's of no use to you. So that's why, like, I try and say, like, your path is your path, and whatever
Yeah.
whatever forks are in front of you, those are the selections that you have, and you choose one and you see where it takes and you learn from that. But yeah, I think that's those are some really good insights. Okay, final question.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to ask this because of the name of the podcast, and I've been asking it so far, so I'm going to continue on
Yeah.
that. What's your definition of an artist? How would you define that?
Oh man. I sort of struggle with that like definition for myself. If somebody would call me that, I think for the longest time I would maybe rightfully, maybe not rightfully be like, no, I'm not an artist. I'm just a guy that does things. I don't know. And there is like a bit of I suppose pretentiousness in calling yourself an artist or an entrepreneur or anything like that. But sometimes I think you find yourself in a role where it's like, well, what do you do? You know, it's like I create things. I make tools. You know, when you're a fucking artist, you know, it's like I'm a drummer. I literally, that's what I do, and I am literally an entrepreneur in every sense. So I struggle with being called that and calling myself that. But to answer your question, I guess maybe in more of a clearer context, even or context in this podcast, the things we've been talking about is like this idea that I've been obsessed with lately, where it's like trying to remember what that feeling I had earlier in my life when I was making stuff from from a place that I was creating. You know, it was from within. It was coming out from within. It wasn't comparative. It wasn't trying to be something else. It wasn't really inspired by, well, maybe it was inspired, but not directly inspired by some other source that I could point to. It was kind of mysterious. It just like kind of came out of me. I've been trying to rediscover that part of me lately, and it seems like that is uh is rare in the world lately. You know, I think sometimes I think about, and this, I don't know if I'll sound like a fucking boomer saying this, but when I watch videos of like Kurt Cobain and Nirvana and stuff, and then I I see this, like he's just like dripping authenticity, or like somebody like Anthony Bourdain who's just like dripping authenticity, and like painfully so. I mean, obviously, my two references, they killed themselves, but there's this thing where it's like, I know you can feel that it was like they were so themselves, and so, something was like coming out of them. It was like almost like vomit. Like I'm thinking about like Kurt Cobain just like screaming on stage. Like there's something so beautiful about that, and I'm not like that. I'm not like him at all. I'm not like Dave Grohl. I'm not like Taylor Hawkins. I used to think I was. I used to try to be like them in the way that I talked or drummed or all that shit. And so now I'm piecing together like, well, who am I really? Like, you know, I'm not those people. And I think being an artist is trying to like figure out who you are, and then vomit all that disgusting shit out.
I think that that has to be one of the best answers I've ever heard. So,
uh,
yeah,
yeah,
but yeah, I do agree with that a lot. Not the vomit part, maybe. Well, I
yeah,
maybe yeah. I mean, could be any kind of body fluids, really. But
yeah,
um, yeah, it's to me like the authenticity is really the key, and it's even
yeah,
that's difficult. Like to even this question is kind of unfair and it's difficult, but even to define like authenticity, that can become a very deep philosophical rabbit hole quite
yeah,
quickly.
right.
But yeah, it's I think it's a beautiful answer. Um, I there was something I wanted to touch on about what you mentioned, but I fear I'm becoming too tired and not my blood sugar isn't what it's meant to
Yeah.
be.
Oh, what
So
time is it there for you now?
now it's 10:15 p.m.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
it's not too bad, but uh,
not too bad.
yeah, I wish maybe I could. Um, no, I can't bring it back to mind, but maybe we'll save that for the next time. Hopefully, there's going to be a next one because
Yeah, man.
we only got through like I don't know a fraction of what I had prepared
Oh,
for
really?
this.
Wow.
Yeah, but don't worry, like it was a lot better because it's always great when people have they bring their own stuff to the table and tell your stories and you can easily bridge between different topics. So yeah, hopefully we can do a second round
Absolutely.
at some point. So
I'm down anytime, man. This is fun.
cool. Yeah, I mean, I've really enjoyed this. This has been I've learned a lot, and it's really nice to get to know you better and
Yeah, likewise.
yep, it's really cool. But again, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Mhm.
I think at least I don't have a really big following for this, but I think anyone
Anytime.
who happens to stumble upon this is probably going to find it pretty cool.
Good. I hope
So,
so.
yeah. So thanks for sharing your thoughts and journey, and again, thanks
Yeah.
for your time.
Yeah, thanks for your time too, and thanks for your interest in wanting to talk about this stuff. It's fun. It's honestly, it's helpful for me too to like, parse through this stuff myself. Helps me understand what I'm doing better too. So, thank you.
Cool. Yeah, that's why I talk to myself on camera for hours on end. But it is like
Yeah,
it is kind of like, well, I guess therapy in a sense, but also like if you don't write it down or if you don't talk it through, you really don't know where you stand with a lot of things. Like you really need
agreed.
to, parse out or think through what you actually think and develop
Right.
your ideas. And that's really been the biggest upside of making this podcast, because
Yeah.
yeah, makes a lot of your thoughts actual. So
Yes. Yeah, it's true. No, I agree. It's like I think everybody should have a podcast sometimes, and then I'm like, there's too many podcasts. So no, maybe not.
yeah, cool. All right. Well, I'm gonna let you go back to your life and
Thank you.
maybe tell your dogs that a weird Finnish guy says hi and
I will.
give them a few scratches and rubs from me. And
Deal. I will. From Markus. I'll
yes,
tell him.
cool, awesome. Well, again, thanks, and we'll talk at some point on something. Hopefully, another
Sounds good.
sample library coming from you, and
We
can't
got
wait
three
to
more
play it.
this year, so definitely yes.
Cool, awesome.
Cool, man. Well, have a good night, and thanks for staying up with me.
Anytime. Cool. See
All
ya.
right, man. See you later.
See ya. Bye bye.